Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Burn the house down. Did you hear what happened to the old house on Birch Street? No? What? It burned down. Burned down? How? Nobody knows for sure. People are saying it was arson. Arson? That place was empty for years. Who would bother? That's what everyone's asking. But there were lights on the night before. Lights? You're serious? As a heart attack. I saw it myself. You were there? Well, I was passing by, took a shortcut through the park. And you didn't think to tell anyone. I didn't think it mattered. Thought maybe the city finally sent someone to clear it out. The city? They don't even fix the street lights. Why would they bother with that house? You're probably right. But who else would be in there? Kids, maybe? You know, messing around. That's what I thought at first. But what? I saw someone. Someone? Yes, a man. Or at least, I think it was a man. You think? What does that mean? It was dark, okay? I couldn't see clearly. But there was someone moving around inside. Did they see you? No. At least, I don't think so. I kept my distance. What were they doing? It looked like they were carrying something. A bag, maybe. A bag? Like a duffel bag? Could have been. Hard to tell from where I was. And then they disappeared. Into the back of the house. That's weird. You didn't hear anything? No. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Did you notice anything else? There was a smell. A smell? Like gasoline. Gasoline? Are you kidding me? No, I swear. I didn't think much of it at the time. How could you not? Gasoline in an old house? That's a red flag. I know that now, okay? But at the time, I just thought it was, I don't know, maybe they were fixing something. Fixing something? In that house? I wasn't thinking clearly. So what did you do after that? I kept walking. You just left? Yeah, and you didn't tell anyone? Who was I supposed to tell? The cops? They wouldn't believe me. Maybe they would have, after it burned down. Look, I didn't know it was gonna burn down. Still, this is bad. I know it is. That's why I've been freaking out. Does anyone else know you were there? No? Not yet, anyway. You sure about that? Yeah. What if someone saw you? Nobody saw me. You can't be certain. I'm telling you, I was careful. But if they find out, they won't. You're awfully confident for someone who's in the middle of this mess. What mess? I didn't do anything. You were there. That's enough to make it messy. So what are you saying? I'm saying you better figure out what you're gonna do if someone starts asking questions. Like who? The cops, for starters. Why would they come to me? I don't know. Maybe they've got cameras or something. Cameras? At that old place? Or nearby? Someone could have seen you. You're just trying to scare me. No. I'm trying to make you think. I am thinking. And I think you're overreacting. Am I? Yeah. Nobody cares about me walking past some abandoned house. Maybe. But what if they find out about the gasoline? What about it? I didn't put it there. Doesn't matter. You were there, you smelled it, and you didn't report it. So what? Is that a crime? Maybe not, but it sure makes you look bad. This is insane. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not saying you did. I'm just saying you're connected now. Connected how? By walking through the park? By seeing something? Fine. Let's say the cops come. What am I supposed to tell them? The truth. The truth? Yeah. You walked by, saw lights, smelled gasoline, and kept going. And you think that's gonna make me look less suspicious? Better than lying? I don't know. This feels all wrong. What's your alternative? I don't know. Maybe just keep quiet? Bad idea. Why? Because secrets have a way of coming out. You don't understand. If I say something, they might think I was involved. Not saying anything makes you look more involved. This is a nightmare. It's not that bad. Not that bad? You just said, I'm connected to a house that burned down. Look, you're not the one who set it on fire, but they don't know that. Then, make them know. How? By being honest. Honest? With cops? That's a joke. You got a better plan? No. Then maybe stop freaking out and just deal with it. Easy for you to say. You weren't there. And I'm trying to keep you from making it worse. Fine. Let's say I tell them. Then what? Then you answer their questions and move on. Just like that? Yeah. You don't think they'll dig deeper? Into what? You didn't do anything. I don't know. What if there's more to this? Like what? Like, what if that guy I saw was the one who started the fire? Then it's even more important that you say something. You're not getting it. What if he saw me? Okay. Let's think this through. There's nothing to think about. If he saw me, I'm screwed. Not necessarily. How do you figure? He doesn't know who you are. What if he does? How? Did you talk to him? No. Then relax. Relax? Are you serious? Yes. You're overthinking this. Overthinking? Someone torched a house, and I was there. You weren't in the house. But I saw him, and he didn't see you. You don't know that? If he did, don't you think he would have come after you? Maybe. Or maybe he's waiting. For what? I don't know. To make sure I don't talk. You're spiraling. Am I? What if this guy's dangerous? He might be. All the more reason to go to the cops. I can't. Why not? Because if I talk, and he finds out, you're making this bigger than it is. Am I? Yeah. I don't think you get how serious this is. I do. And that's why you need to stop hiding. I can't. You can. No, I can't. What if... Stop. Listen to yourself. What? You're working yourself up over nothing. Nothing? Yeah. You think this is nothing? Compared to what it could be? Yeah. What does that mean? It means you're not the one who burned the house down. And that's all that matters. I wish I could believe that. You should. I don't know. Then figure it out fast. Because this isn't going away. What do you mean? Sooner or later, someone's gonna come knocking. And when they do, be ready. I hope you're right. I am. You better be. I am. The Unnatural Diary. Part 1. The Unintended Discovery. Dust swirled in the dim light as Sarah pushed aside a stack of brittle newspapers, her fingers brushing against something unexpected. Soft, worn leather. She reached into the box of forgotten books and relics, pulling free an old, weathered diary. Its edges were frayed with time, the cover nearly stripped of its once proud embossing, now smooth and cool beneath her touch. A faint residue of salt clung to its surface, as if it had weathered years of quiet decay or been touched by the sea itself. Intrigued, she carefully pried it open near the middle, where thick, textured pages crackled with age. The paper felt different, denser than usual, almost like parchment. The ink, though faded, carried an unusual shimmer. as if the words still pulsed with some lingering energy, revealing a chilling passage. I had to move quickly, but the floorboards betrayed me, groaning beneath my steps as I crept through the darkened hall. It was close. I could feel its snarling breath, cold and damp, seeping through the walls, making them feel thinner than they were. The air was thick with the weight of its presence. I had to make it to the kitchen. I had to get to the closest bag of consecrated salt before it was too late. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. The words read like a story, yet something about them felt strangely real and weren't meant to entertain, but to warn. She flipped another page, the dry parchment whispering as it moved, and something slipped loose. A note, a single yellowed slip of paper, fluttered to the attic floor. Sarah bent to retrieve it, her pulse quickening as she read the hastily scrawled words. If you've found this, it already knows. It already knows? The words sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. What does that mean? What already knows? Shaking off the unease, she set the diary aside, convincing herself it was just a very old diary. Nothing more. She returned to cleaning, determined to finish the task before indulging her curiosity. Later, with the attic finally organized, Sarah sank into the old desk chair she had recently dusted off and pulled from the corner. It paired well with an antique desk she had just cleaned off, a piece that had likely sat buried beneath clutter for years. Exhaustion giving way to curiosity, she reached for the diary, opening it to the first page, her fingers brushing over the worn pages, coming to the inside of the cover, where a passage so intimate it felt as though she was intruding on something deeply personal, was scrawled in elegant handwriting. To my beautiful Colette, may the enchantment of these pages cradle your precious memories and bridge the distance between us, keeping our hearts forever intertwined with eternal love. Roderick Shadowthorn of Moonvale Hollow. Beneath the inscription, in a more delicate script, another line had been added. Given to me by my love on Saturday, February 28th, 1953. Sarah's pulse quickened. The names, Roderick Shadowthorn, Moonvale Hollow, felt almost otherworldly, like something plucked from a forgotten fairy tale. Sarah turned to the first entry, March 2nd, 1953. My dearest new diary. I am excited to begin writing. I can scarcely believe my fortune. Has it only been weeks since I met Roderick? It feels as though I have known him forever, as though our souls recognized one another long before our eyes had ever met. He is unlike anyone I have ever known. His presence is both briskly confident and gentle, and his words laced with a wisdom as though he has seen lifetimes beyond my own. Fascinates me. When I am with him, the world feels richer and brighter, as if I have stepped beyond the veil and into something wondrous. His world is unlike anything I could have imagined. Mystical, brimming with enchantment and secrets woven through everything there. He speaks of things I cannot yet comprehend, yet I believe every word. When he takes my hand, I swear I can feel the pulse of something ancient and powerful. He calls himself a hermit, or rather, that's what others call him. But to me, he is nothing short of extraordinary. Everything about him is mesmerizing. His long, dark waves that frame his face, the depth of his warm brown eyes, and oh, the way he looks at me, as if I am the only thing that exists in his world. It sends my heart racing, my breath catching in my throat. I have never felt so seen, so cherished. If this is love, then let me remain lost in it forever. I do not know what the future holds, nor how we will balance our lives together. But I know I wish to be with Roderick forever, and I will follow wherever this enchantment leads. Forever hopeful, Colette. Wow. Sarah exhaled the word, unable to stop the tinge of jealousy creeping into her voice. To feel that in love, to be cherished like that. She had once known that feeling, back when she and Neil were still wrapped in the bliss of their early days. But those days had faded, worn thin by time and disappointment, until all that remained was silence and a divorce finalized 3 years ago. Now, her world revolved around work, the occasional night out with friends, and a growing reluctance to let anyone get too close again. She shook off the thought and turned the page, only to feel as though something else was guiding her hand. The diary fell open to a blank page, yet at the top, written in the same elegant script, a date had already been inscribed. March 15th, 2025. Sarah's breath hitched. Her pulse pounded in her ears. That's today's date. She stumbled back, nearly losing her balance. Her mind raced for an explanation, but none made sense. The diary was old, decades old. How could this be? A chill swept through the attic, and she rubbed her arms, trying to shake the unease pressing against her chest. It's just a coincidence, a weird, creepy coincidence. Forcing a nervous laugh, she muttered, "Okay, that's enough reading for today. I just need a shower, food, and..." Before she could finish, a brilliant light erupted from the diary, flooding the attic in a blinding radiance. The air crackled, thick with an energy she could feel rushing over her skin. A high-pitched hum filled her ears as the pages of the diary flared open, their edges glowing with an unnatural heat. Sarah barely had time to scream before the light consumed her. Then, silence. The attic stood empty. The diary lay undisturbed on the desk. A new entry had appeared on the once blank page. March 15th, 2025. I could sense a release. The connection to her world is back. It seems different somehow. Oh, how I can't wait to see her again. What is this? She? She opened it? Who is she? She has dared to open Colette's diary. She will answer for this. She will. The sentence trailed off, the ink still wet, as if waiting to be finished. Part 2. The vanished sister. As the last of the evening sun faded into a moonless sky, Gloria settled in beside her husband, the familiar hum of their favorite television show filling the room. The night was calm, uneventful, until the phone shattered the quiet with a sharp trill. Gloria glanced at the caller ID. A slight frown creased her brow. Miranda? Sarah's friend? Why would she be calling? Perplexed, she rose from the couch, murmuring to her husband, "I'll be right back." Pressing the phone to her ear, she answered hesitantly. "Hello? Miranda? Hey, Gloria. I'm sorry for calling so late." Miranda's voice wavered, the hesitation in her tone setting Gloria instantly on edge. "I got your number from Sarah's records," and Gloria's throat tightened. Sarah's records? We were wondering if everything was okay with her. She hasn't been to work in about a week, and we're starting to get worried. We've tried calling, leaving messages, but she hasn't answered. This isn't like her at all. And Miranda hesitated before continuing, her voice barely above a whisper. She missed an important deadline for a major project on Wednesday. Gloria gripped the phone tighter. Sarah? Missing work? Ignoring calls? Failing to meet a deadline? The words barely registered as the realization slowly settled into fear. She hadn't spoken to her sister in nearly 2 weeks. That wasn't unusual for them. Life had a way of pulling them in different directions, but Sarah not showing up for work, and no word to anyone, that was impossible. That was not Sarah, and suddenly, the quiet night didn't feel so peaceful anymore. The familiar rhythm of her world began to close in. Where is my sister? By the time the police got involved, Gloria had already exhausted every possible explanation. Even Sarah's ex-husband Neil had flown into town, trying to find out what he could from their mutual acquaintances and his family in the area. But the more they searched, the deeper the mystery became. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no evidence of foul play. Sarah's car remained parked in the driveway. Her purse sat neatly on the dining table, car keys beside it. The house, meticulously arranged, just as she always kept it. Security footage only deepened the mystery. The last recording showed Sarah arriving home from work last Friday, locking the door behind her, and then nothing. No one entered. No one left, leaving the house feeling eerily undisturbed, as if she had vanished without a trace. Her co-workers, Amalia and Miranda, had been the first to raise the alarm. They knew their friend would not miss work, especially not a major deadline, not without calling, not without an explanation. This was an impossibility for someone as methodical and precise as Sarah. So where had she gone? Then there was the opened diary in the attic, sitting on the antique desk in the attic. Its cracked leather cover bore the weight of years. It wasn't Sarah's. Gloria knew that much. The pages, thick and time-worn, had been left open as if abandoned in haste. And there, scrawled in elegant yet unsettling handwriting, was a date, March 15th, 2025, last Saturday, the day after Sarah was last seen. The police had skimmed through the diary, dismissing it as nothing more than an old journal Sarah had stumbled upon. Perhaps she had been reading it, maybe even planning to write something inspired by it. After all, she had only moved into the house last October. The previous owner, a woman in her 90s, had passed away the year before, and her children had taken what little they wanted. Antiques, heirlooms, family photographs. The rest had been left behind in their rush to sell the house. But as Gloria sat at the old antique desk staring at the diary, unease slithered through her. She reached for it hesitantly, fingers grazing the worn leather cover. A whisper of movement stirred the air, though the room was still. The moment she picked up the book, a chill pricked deep in her bones. Something told her that Sarah hadn't just disappeared. She had been taken. Part 3, the final entry. Taking a steadying breath, Gloria flipped through the pages, only to have them land on the last recorded entry again. March 15th, 2025. I could sense a release. The connection to her world is back. It seems different somehow. Oh, how I can't wait to see her again. What is this? She opened it? Who is she? She has dared to open Colette's diary. She will answer for this. She will... The ink shimmered in shifting, iridescent hues of black and blue, as if the words were still being formed, not yet complete. A low hum vibrated through the attic, the air thickening with something unnatural. Gloria clenched her jaw. An aching sense of dread settled in her chest. This wasn't just a diary. This was something else. Something supernatural. Sarah, what did you do? With a deep breath, she turned the page. And Gaba, March 20th, 2025. She keeps running again. I'll find her again. She will tell me where Colette is. She does not belong. She is not Colette. She fights, but she cannot escape. She will stay. If I cannot have my Colette, I found her again. She hides. These people cannot protect her from me. She is strong, but endurance lasts only so long. Gloria's stomach twisted. Sarah was alive, but she wasn't just missing. She was trapped. Somewhere beyond this world, desperation clawed at her chest. There had to be something, some way to help Sarah. Flipping frantically through the brittle pages, she stopped when she found an entry dated April 10th, 1956. The ink was uneven, smudged in places, as though written in haste. April 10th, 1956. I have kept it at bay with consecrated salt. I believe I have found a way to seal this diary. It was forged by Roderick's own hands, a doorway between both worlds. It seems impossible to destroy, but I must protect my husband, my children. The salt has bound the door. He cannot come through that way again. I did love him once, but what he was becoming, now he is lost to rage and darkness. No longer the man I loved. He is something else now, a vile creature. I pray no one ever finds this diary. I have been told, soak cloth in sea salt. Wrap the diary within it. The realms will be severed. If this works, this will be my last entry. If it doesn't, God help me. The smudged words ended abruptly. Gloria's hands trembled as she closed the diary. She knew what she had to do. Colette had sealed the diary once before. Gloria would do it again. Gloria searched the attic, her hands trembling, looking for any salt that may have been left. Thankfully, Sarah had cleaned and organized the space not too long ago, making it easier to find what she needed. But would it work? Would it not only seal the diary, but also bring Sarah back? Her fingers brushed against something cool and metallic. An old tin can with the words "Consecrated Salt" embossed on its worn surface. Inside, a thick, heavy bag of salt remained untouched. Waiting, anxious, Gloria quickly opened the diary to the most recent entry. Her heart pounded as she poured a thick line of salt down the center of the open pages, then traced a protective circle around it. She didn't know what she was doing, but she had to do something. It had already been a week since Sarah disappeared. The air shifted. A strange, oppressive stillness pressed down on the attic. Then, the diary lifted off the desk. A plume of smoke curled from its pages as an eerie glow pulsed from within. The pages flared open, flipping wildly as a gust of wind erupted through the attic. Bolts of crackling light shot from the diary, slamming into the wooden beams and shaking the very foundation of the house. Gloria stumbled back, shielding her face as the attic groaned, the walls pulsating as if the house itself were alive. Then, a scream, low and guttural, full of rage and loss, a scream that was not human. And just as suddenly as it began, everything stilled. The diary dropped to the floor with a final thud, its edges slightly singed. The attic fell silent, the air refreshed into somewhat normalcy. Gloria hesitated before stepping forward. The diary lay motionless, its pages now eerily still. A single final entry had appeared. March 21st, 2025. She is gone. My Colette has left me. I am nothing without her. Oh, Colette. I am so sorry. I loved you so. I waited. You never came. I am no more, finally, released from my agony. Then, without warning, the diary slammed shut. Gloria's breath caught. Where is Sarah? Please, give me my sister back, she cried, voice breaking. A soft thud echoed from downstairs. Heart pounding, Gloria bolted down the steps, and there, lying in the center of the living room, was Sarah. dazed, shaken, a little battered, but very much alive. Sarah blinked at her, disoriented. "Gloria?" Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "You're here. What happened?" Tears blurred Gloria's vision as she rushed forward, pulling her sister into a fierce hug. "Oh, Sarah, you're home!" Sarah shuddered against her. I saw him. Roderick. He was a monster, Gloria. Twisted by rage. He was searching for Colette, furious that she had betrayed him, that she had moved on, married someone else. Gloria cupped Sarah's face, her thumbs brushing against her cheeks, wiping the tears. "You're safe now. It's over." Sarah's gaze flickered toward the attic door. Her voice was quieter now, wary. "Is it?" Gloria took a slow breath. "I think he finally found peace. After all these years, he was released from his pain." Sarah nodded, but unease lingered in her expression. "Then let's make sure no one ever opens that diary again," Gloria agreed, and without hesitation, they climbed back up to the attic, grabbing the diary. Then, under the moon's watchful glow, they carried it out back, straight to the fire pit. As the flames consumed the aged leather and time-worn pages, an unnatural wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the last echoes of Roderick Shadowthorn of Moonvale Hollow. And for the first time in 70 years, Moonvale Hollow would be forgotten forever, or so they hoped. The whisper in the city, the dark skeletons of skyscrapers stretched into the twilight sky. I trudged along an empty street, my feet dragging through the damp sand, leaving deep grooves behind me. How long had I been here? I couldn't tell. The overcast horizon was slowly growing lighter, the mist thinning with each passing moment. The street seemed familiar to me, but any landmarks that might have been here before were completely effaced now. Everything around me was falling apart, disintegrating into sand that covered every inch of the ground. Suddenly, a soft, faint whisper came from somewhere in the distance. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen anyone else in this desolate place, so I shuffled toward the sound. The voice came again, this time a little closer and more insistent, but I still couldn't make out the words or pinpoint where it was coming from. I tried to pick up my pace, but the sand was dense and viscous between my toes. The whisper kept calling, getting clearer, as though someone was tuning a radio. It was soothing, but firm. I sensed it wished me no harm, at least as long as I did what it told me to. Finally, I understood what it was saying. "Come on, just a little bit further," the voice urged. It seemed like it was coming from a building to my right. I stared into the shadows in the gaping doorway that led into a dark hall. Nobody was there. I caught a reflection in one of the grimy shards of glass jutting from a window frame. Was it me? It couldn't be. How could I be this old and shriveled. I turned away and wandered toward the low horizon. "We need to get ready. Somebody is coming," the voice called from up ahead. A warm rain suddenly began to fall. It frothed in my hair and trickled down my cheeks. The air filled with a strange scent, something fresh and sweet. It didn't seem right. Rain shouldn't smell like that. The voice kept coaxing me forward, and I kept on wading through fragrant sheets of rain, my feet squelching in the soggy sand. After a while, the rain stopped, and the sky cleared a little, though the sun was still hidden behind the thick veil of clouds. The lukewarm mist curled around every turn, filling the streets that branched out from the crossroads I passed. If only it were clear enough to see what lay in the distance. Maybe then I could remember. Just as I reached the next junction, the whisper gave me a new command. "All right, let's get something to eat. Come on now. Turn here." I looked from side to side. Across the road to my left stood the remains of a diner. I plodded toward the building through the endless sand. I thought there couldn't possibly be anything to eat here, but as I stumbled over the threshold, I caught a whiff of toast and coffee. The diner was as decayed as everything else in this city. There was less sand inside than on the street, but it still covered the floor with an even layer. The display counter stood empty, the glass shattered. Here and there, overturned furniture lay scattered across the ground. The upholstery on the chairs and benches had rotted away a long time ago. The cup-shaped clock on the wall was missing its hands. Decay, dust, and sand. There was no one inside. Still, I heard muted whispers coming from every corner, buzzing like cicadas on a summer night. I moved through the room, trying to make out what the voices were saying, but there were just too many of them now. I shuffled through the jumbled chairs and tables to the center of the room. Here, on one of the tables, sat a plate of food and a cup of coffee. My stomach rumbled. There were no utensils, so I grabbed the food with my hands, stuffing it into my mouth. The toast was crunchy on the outside and soft on the inside. The omelet was fluffy and creamy. The coffee was strong and sweet. How long had it been since I had last eaten anything? I wasn't sure. It felt like ages. Suddenly, the air around me shimmered as though in a heat haze. The dilapidated diner faded away, and I found myself in a warm, sunlit kitchen. Light wood furniture, a crisp tablecloth, plates with delicate flower patterns on the rim. A woman stood in front of the stove. Her hair fell in neat waves, and she wore a light blue fit and flare dress. She turned to me and smiled. "Georgie, would you like another piece of toast?" she asked. Was she talking to me? Was that my name? I wanted to ask her what was going on, but before I could find the words, the mirage disappeared. I was back in the decaying diner, an empty plate before me. "Okay, George, you're done? Let's go now," the whisper cooed. I followed the voice back into the street. It kept urging me forward with its bright, incessant tone. Well, at least now I knew my name. But all the other questions still whirled in my head. What did the voice want from me? Where was I going? How long had I been here? Who was I? Really, it felt like this mess in my head would boil over, washing away all this dirty sand and all the debris of this dead city. I gritted my teeth, clenched my fists, and plowed forward. At last, the road led me to a park. Patches of grass poked through the sand. The trees, covered in yellow and red leaves, peeked through the fog, taunting me. A path lined with benches led into the mist. "All right, let's sit down here." I settled onto the nearest bench. Quiet fragments of music fluttered to me from somewhere far away. The sound was comforting, familiar. The voice hummed around me for a moment before fading into the background. The music grew louder and steadier. I thought I recognized the melody, but couldn't quite put my finger on it. It reminded me of someone I used to miss. I sat alone, enveloped by the soothing blanket of music, staring at the colorful trees before me. Bit by bit, my angst and frustration melted away. After a while, I heard the whispers again. The voice that had been guiding me was talking to somebody else now. The new voice seemed familiar, like I'd heard it sometime long ago, in another life. I felt a movement in the air beside me. Someone touched my hand. "Dad? Dad, it's me." "Child." The small room was tidy and clean, as nice as a room in such a facility could be. The curtains were open, and you could see a small park colored in gold and red by the approaching cold. An old jazz standard was flowing from the player in the corner. A woman sat on a stool beside an armchair where an old, frail man rested. She held his hand. "I'm sorry, Miss Ross. He's not having a good day today," a nurse said gently from behind the armchair. To be honest, they're few and far between now, and it's hard to say how many more he'll have. I know, but it's still so hard. It's like he's wandering further and further away, the woman said, wiping the corner of her eye. Dad, it's Katie. I'm here." His dry, thin fingers tightened around hers. Dear Death. Hello, old friend. I would be amiss if I called you a stranger now, as the frequency of your visits in my life have made us more than acquaintances. It has been years since our first run in together. When I met you, I didn't understand. You were a being within yourself, a standalone, vital force that I didn't recognize for what you really stood for. Your introduction to me preceded the death of my grandpa on September 24th, 1998. The mighty being that he was, the biggest form of life I knew, was ripped from me, and you were the thief that came in and stole him. He lived a long life, I was told, satisfied, and a job well done. But as I heard these things, none of them gave me comfort. Silently, I began to develop distrust. You made me weary of so many things, of bonds formed with those around me, of meaningful, lasting love that would carry me through hardships, and of you, death itself, and that you could take from me in an instant what life had freely given me to experience. I was only 13 years old, but I knew you were someone I needed to always watch out for. That you would be there even while I smiled and enjoyed life, and the moments it actually made me smile. I thought we wouldn't meet again for years to come. I thought I had given enough of my heart to you when I was a child to buy my way through years of togetherness with those that I loved. I thought my heartache was payment enough, but you had other plans. September 6th, 2020. The eldest of my grandfather's children, his only baby girl, was taken. You started with a queen. I must tell you, and her death hit me hard. My auntie was the most thoughtful, caring, most, even if I don't have my life together, I'm going to look out for you, most amazing woman I have ever known. She was loud, boisterous, fun-loving, but would teach you a well-needed lesson. She was the oldest of all boys, so she was tough. Yet, even she was no match for you and your exploits. You took her from us and never looked back. June 27th, 2021. I learned my first lesson on how unfair you could be. My 12-year-old cousin was snatched away so fast by you. None of us seen it coming. For the first time in my life, I saw a mother so broken by her grief she could barely speak. A father so lost without his son he could barely stand before the casket that held him and say goodbye. But most of all, your grim visit showed me that no matter how much I loved my children, or tried to protect them from the harsh realities of the life, when it really mattered, my love couldn't save them from you. No amount of protecting them in the world would keep them from your grasp when you decided to whisk through my life and take them or someone else I love. November 1st, 2022. You sought me out in the worst of ways. You knew all too well my fears and panic over the remote possibility of me losing one of my children. Knew all too well that it would destroy me. Opening the door to my daughter's room that day, I walked into my nightmare, made my reality. Death, you take many a soul, every night. always there to absorb the essence of those we lose. So I know you heard my whispered words in the night. I know you knew, down to the fiber of your being, my worst fear. I know you knew my truth as deep and as well as I did. So when realized, you took my daughter, another bright light that those around me, who have nothing else to offer as comfort, will say was a life gone too soon. It solidified my ill thoughts of you, that you didn't play fair, that you took every opportunity to fight dirty. My daughter, one piece of my tattered heart that I managed to birth and have walk around personified, flesh and blood. You take her, and not me. You felt, as you always do, that it was time, that she had done all she was here to do, and that again, it was a job well done, and she no longer had to face a world where depression and sadness touched her. The traumas she experienced and always took her mind to a place where I couldn't reach her would never again have her lost. Here, I have to be honest with you, Death. As much as I hate to even say your name, I am overjoyed that the ugliness of life can never reach her again. But I needed more time. 15 years will never be enough. I look for her in the moon, as I know you walked her toward it. However, I will forever say, you're unfair. She was my glue, that kid that kept us all together. She was just finding her smile, her real smile, just finding a reason beyond me, as she told me, to live her life to the fullest. You took her little sister's person, and the one she talked to all the time, her brother's game partner, whom he discovered new levels on soul caliber with, her big sister's binge show watcher, and how they could watch whole seasons together in one night, her father's favorite, and how he doted on her, her mama number two's confidant, and how she helped her realize it was okay to love herself. You took my partner in crime, my me and you against it all, if you will, the one who would make me smile even when the world sought out my tears. Shame on you. In losing her, I lost myself, and I have no one else to blame but you. How dare you take my child from me? Have you not taken enough in your time with me? From your time with everyone? From the unexpectant parents who should never have to bury their children, or the children you've orphaned? Has your roster not been filled with mothers and fathers, beloved aunts or favorite uncles? My daughter's name was too pure to be added to your list, and as the world moved on, going back to the daily hustle and bustle, I'm here stuck in the moment. You ripped my sanity to shreds, and in the far reaches of my mind, I can hear the echoes of your laughter, and I know you feel pleasure in the grief you leave in your wake. That is when all the "I'm here if you need me's" or the "call me any times" slow down, and the quiet nights last longer than you ever imagined they could last. I always come back to you. I think about how you have visited me so many times just to destroy my peace and disrupt my every day. The day you took my daughter, you took a piece of me too, and you have left me forever, grasping at the dark threads of your coattails, trying to hold on to the part of me you are trying to take, my grip constantly slipping, but I can't let go. To let go of you would mean I lose my grasp on her. The only thing that pulled me through was my support system that surrounded me and helped me recover from your violent breeze of a visit. Your homecomings always come with tears and loss. I'm finally coming to realize. August 11th, 2023. You paid me a visit once again, but this time I expected you. The cancer that ravished my uncle's body and had him giving up on life were signs that alerted me. You weren't far behind. Out of the 7 uncles I have, he was my favorite. When I came out and introduced the family to my now wife, he was the one who protected me from judgment and harsh words. Any problem with me had to go through him first, and he accepted me even before my father told me he loved me still. We could talk about anything, and we did. We talked about religion, life, politics, love, relationships, and more. There was never any judgment. My whole life, he loved me for me. Yet again, you decided we had enough of the mighty presence he exuded, and you snuffed his light out after a long, hard-fought battle. The only solace I take in his passing is that he no longer has to go through that pain. And I suppose, deep down, if I'm honest, I should thank you for that. But that's where my thanks for you ends. Death. If you're still with me, I promise I'll tell you why. I had the honor for 39 years to have a man in my life who stood through it all. A man who, no matter what the test that was thrown at him, he found a way to make it work. How he stood tall against adversity. Who made sure he built and had the foundation to bring to any table. A man who showed up whenever called upon. Who had so much wisdom that he imparted, whether you wanted him to or not, and always did it with love. And it was exactly what you needed to hear. I had the pleasure of calling this man my father. When I seen him when he lost his own father, I watched him put his grief to the side to stand tall for his sister and brothers. How I seen him tuck his fear of you, death, and stand in the place you had just removed his father from and lead his family. When I seen this, I seen a mighty, strong man that stood against it all, including you, to make a way for his entire family. Not just his children, but for his brothers, wife, and anyone he came into contact with. He exuded strength in a way that made even you, death, stand still, if only for a while. For as you always do, you creeped and snaked your way in and preyed on most anyone's worst fear, losing the ones they love. You always find a way to strike when our defenses are down and our hearts are at their fullest. My father's strength is what I always leaned on, what I drew from. When I was weak, he poured his strength into me, even if he didn't know it. Whenever I called for him, he showed up, no questions asked. It was this example he set for me that allows me to show up for my children in the same way. When I needed my father, he was more to me than anyone could ever be. Yet the smile that man brought to my face shined too bright for you to know that he was one of the main reasons I survived. You selfishly taking my daughter from me. To know he poured so much life into me, even though you had tried your hardest to break me. To know that I no longer have that strength to call upon has broken me in a way I never knew a person could break. I see you relish in the pain you cause as you unfairly take the children of strangers, mothers who have lost their young ones, just like me. You make me know them in a way I never would understand, unless I too, like them, have you as a friend. We know you're toxic, but we're stuck with you, attached for the rest of our lives. I never wanted to know them, or you like this. The next year, I began to unbend myself, for what had been meant to destroy me didn't, although it definitely bent me almost to my breaking point. I became complacent and comfortable, taking for granted phone calls and visits with those I held dear, thinking I had those moments in abundance. I became forgetful of the power and pain you wielded so freely and without favorites, because I hadn't seen you for over 365 days. I relaxed enough to think, I can finally breathe. It hurts, and it's labored, and feel like needles poke me with every intake. But I can take a breath, and it feels like I never have before. 2024 for me was a year of realization, reckoning, redirection, and remembrance. And I must admit, the embedded hate I constantly feel for you, the fear of you that I always have on the back burner of my mind, took a back seat to my goals and achievements, and my planning to make things better for me and my family, and do them to honor my daughter's memory. It was a time for promises made and kept, to do better for her than I had been doing in the time since she'd been gone. For I had lost myself for a long time because of your thievery. When I lost her, I lost a large part of who I was, and I spent months on an alcoholic whirlwind. It was my father who finally broke through my hazy merry-go-round with his love and understanding and words of wisdom and support. I'm 39, and I still have yet to make a single decision without him. His opinion has always held a heavy weight in what I decide to do, no matter how big or small the decision. To you, however, my decisions are irrelevant and null in void. For you decided, once again, that I'd had enough. And when you decide things, your decisions come with such finality. I'm starting to understand that you see our fears and they empower you. You made me realize, in real time, one of my worst fears. And yet, not even a full 3 years from the date I lost my baby, and you took the air form my lungs, you're still searching the inner reaches of my being for more, saying gleefully to yourself, who else is she scared of losing that I can take and watch how she crumbles? On January 27th, 2025, my pillar of strength, my Papachu, my Superman, breathed his last breath. He kissed my mother on her cheek, told her he loved her, waited until he was alone with you, and followed you onto the abyss. How can he be gone? He's Superman. I assume you were his kryptonite. He knew he was close and felt you hovering, but he knew all too well our fear of losing someone else, and that fear of you hurting us again kept him quiet. You stole his voice, and he couldn't let us know his true pain, although I didn't think I would see you again for years to come. When I felt you this time around, you were like a fragrance in the air that I recognized instantly. I hate that you are so familiar to me. You took my daddy. How could you? When I got the call carrying the worst news I could hear, I knew it was because of you, before a word was spoken. You, death, have left me truly on my own in this world, with this constant, pulsing, alive, reverberating fear of your next coming, and who you will take this time. I don't even know if I fear you anymore. More so, I now expect you to unexpectedly, without any preparation on my part, will float through my life and etch notches in me as if I were a wall measuring the continued growth of a child. You have shattered my already broken heart into a million pieces, and all I can manage is this plea, death. I plead with you. Let us once again become strangers. Let us become so distant. The thought of remembrance between us is alien. I want to know you no more. Flee from me, and touch not any more of those I love. I have given enough of my heart as payment for the bonds I've created, and you have severed. Please sail away on the ocean of tears. You have forced me to cry and never return to me. Signed, your well-known, but very reluctant and unwilling friend, Khalees, the quiet witness. Ava Winter had always been defined by her words. They were her weapon, her shield, her very identity. As a journalist, she had built her career on exposing truths hidden beneath layers of deceit. Her voice, steady, compelling, unmistakable, had won her awards and opened doors to places most people could only dream of. But now it was gone. How did this happen to me? She wondered, her eyes tracing the blank walls of her small, lifeless apartment. Each morning felt like waking into a nightmare she couldn't escape. For 6 months, she had tried to piece together the shattered fragments of her existence, but nothing seemed to fit. How could she move forward when the very thing that had defined her, her voice, was lost? I used to fill rooms with my words. Now, I can't even manage a whisper. Her friends had stopped calling within weeks, unsure of how to navigate the silence that now consumed her life. Ava understood, but their absence still stung. Who wants to sit in awkward silence with someone who was once the loudest in the room? Bitterness coiled through her thoughts, uninvited but persistent. Morning light seeped through the blinds, casting faint, pale stripes across the apartment's barren walls. The fragile glow barely softened the dullness that enveloped her. Her once crowded bookshelves, filled with dog-eared biographies and neatly stacked notebooks, now stood half empty. Their contents were crammed haphazardly into boxes scattered across the floor, a reflection of the disarray in her heart. Her fingers drifted to the edge of the nightstand, brushing against its surface as she reached for her phone. She froze mid-motion at the sight of the blank screen. No texts, no missed calls, no one left to call anyway, she thought, the sharp ache of loneliness settling heavily in her chest. In her loneliest moments, Ava turned to her journal. Her pen flew across the pages, spilling out the thoughts she could no longer voice. At first, the words felt hollow, like whispers of a life slipping further from her grasp. But over time, they became her anchor, a fragile thread connecting her to the person she once was. Her gaze often drifted to a framed photo teetering on the edge of the bookshelf. Taken 2 years earlier, it captured a time when her life brimmed with purpose. Her byline had graced the city's most prominent publications, her career thriving. In the photo, she stood on a balcony overlooking the bustling downtown streets, microphone in hand, laughing with unrestrained joy. The memory clawed at her heart. I used to own every room I walked into. Now, I'm trapped in this one, swallowing me whole. Ava's fingers grazed the leather-bound journal, resting on her desk. She flipped it open, watching as the transformation unfolded before her eyes. Once neatly penned entries filled with hopeful plans and promises had turned into chaotic scribbles and unfinished thoughts. The journal had become more than a daily ritual. It was her lifeline, a fragile thread connecting her to a reality she feared was slipping away. Even as she poured her thoughts onto its pages, the oppressive stillness of the room closed in around her, heavy and stifling. Tightening her grip on the pen, she thought, "How did this happen to me?" With deliberate strokes, she scrawled 2 words across the page. Still here. She stared at them, letting the silence stretch, their uncertain and resolute meaning. The park had become her only refuge from the stifling walls of her apartment. She appreciated how the trees muffled the city's constant noise, providing a space where the silence felt peaceful rather than overwhelming. The biting winter air stung her cheeks as she wandered along the familiar path, her boots crunching over frost-covered grass. Skeletal trees creaked softly in the wind, their shadows reaching across the ground like long fingers, tightening her scarf against the cold, the rough wool grazing her skin. Ava was about to head home when she noticed them. Near the frozen lake, 2 figures stood, silhouetted against the faint glow of a nearby lamppost. At first glance, Ava assumed they were lovers, drawn to the romance of the icy night. But as she moved closer, the scene shifted. The mask loomed over the woman, his movements sharp and aggressive, cutting through the stillness like a blade. The woman shrank back, arms crossed tightly, her posture tense and defensive. Ava froze, her breath crystallizing in the frigid air as unease coiled tightly in her chest. Her heart thudded as she squinted into the darkness, trying to make sense of the scene. The woman tilted her head slightly, her voice, if she spoke, too faint to rise above the biting wind. Ava hesitated, her feet faltering as the weight of the stillness pressed down around her, heavy and foreboding. "It's not my business," Ava told herself, her stomach twisting uneasily. Despite the thought, her feet carried her forward, almost automatically. She slipped off the path, her boots sinking into the frozen grass as she ducked behind a tree. Gripping its rough bark with trembling fingers, she peered out from the shadows, her pulse quickening. The man's sharp, angry voice sliced through the icy stillness, though the wind scattered his words before they could reach her fully. Ava squinted into the dim light. The woman stood rigid, her arms crossed tightly, her posture defensive, her responses, soft and hesitant, were little more than fragments that dissolved in the biting wind. Ava's chest tightened. Something's wrong. Do something. But what? I can't even. Her thoughts shattered as the man lunged, shoving the woman with brutal force. Ava's breath caught as the woman slipped on the ice. For one excruciating moment, time seemed to stop. The air stood still, the world eerily frozen, until the fragile frost beneath the woman cracked. The sound was sharp and jarring, like breaking glass. A splash shattered the silence as the woman disappeared into the frigid, dark water. Panic surged through Ava like a tidal wave. Scream. Call for help. Do something, she begged herself, but her voice refused to come, locked deep within the recesses of her mind. Desperation set in as her shaking hands fumbled in her pocket. After a frantic struggle, she pulled out her phone and hit the record button, her fingers trembling against the icy metal. Then he turned. The man's head snapped toward her, and their gazes locked with unnerving precision. There, in the dim light, Ava felt the intensity of his stare, piercing, calculated, and merciless. It cut through the darkness, striking at the core of her fear. Her stomach clenched with unease. He sees me. He knows, I saw. He stepped toward her, his boots crunching loudly on the frosted ground. Ava didn't wait to see what would come next. Her legs jolted into motion, slipping and sliding as she bolted back toward the path. Her breaths came in short, ragged bursts, her heart pounding like a frantic drumbeat as the icy air seared her lungs. Later, Ava sat at her desk, staring at the blurry video looping on her laptop screen. Barely 10 seconds long, the shaky footage revealed almost nothing. The man's face was lost in a haze, and the woman's fall disappeared into the shadows. It's not enough, she thought bitterly, frustration coiling in her stomach like a spring. Clenching her fists tightly, she replayed the scene again. I saw it happen. I know what I saw. Why isn't that enough? She had gone to the police, but their skepticism had been palpable. Unable to speak, Ava resorted to scribbling frantic notes, pointing at her phone and gesturing in sheer desperation. Yet her efforts were met with dismissive questions. Why hadn't she called for help? Why was the video so unclear? Did she even know the people involved? By the end of the interview, Ava felt like the one under suspicion, the weight of their doubts pressing heavily on her. Back in her apartment, anger simmered beneath the surface. Her notepad lay open on the cluttered desk, its pages littered with hastily scrawled thoughts and disjointed leads. As she tapped her pen against the edge of the desk, the scene replayed vividly in her mind. How could they dismiss it so quickly? She thought, her chest tightening. You were there. You saw it. Isn't that enough? But the memory of the detective's dismissive tone echoed, fueling the frustration building inside her. Ava slammed the notepad shut. This is why I became a journalist. To expose people like him. To give a voice to the powerless. And now, I'm the one without a voice. Her laptop screen flickered. The video paused on the shadowy outline of the man by the frozen lake. No features, no clarity. Just darkness. Ava clenched her fists, biting back the doubt, gnawing at her resolve. Not enough, she thought bitterly, as she grabbed her pen and scrawled the words across her notepad with such force that the paper tore. Her hands trembled as the detective's words replayed in her mind. A blurry video isn't much to go on. Without more, there's not much we can do. Tears prickled her eyes. They think I'm delusional. They think I imagined it all. Helpless. Powerless. She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. You're not helpless. You've never been helpless. Her reflection in the window caught her eye, tense and weary. She leaned against the wall, inhaling deeply, her fists still clenched. This is why you don't quit, she reminded herself. Because people like him can't get away with this. You can't let them win. A sharp chime from her computer broke the heavy stillness. Crossing the room, Ava froze when she saw the sender's name. Lucas. Her breath hitched. A flicker of something she hadn't felt in months breaking through the haze. Hope. His response was brief, but direct. And it ignited something in her. You're not doing this alone anymore. Lucas had been there during her prime. One of the few who understood her dogged pursuit of the truth. Now, he was ready to help. Together, they began unraveling Victor Hayes's carefully concealed life. Corruption, intimidation, a pattern of calculated violence cloaked behind a polished facade. Each new revelation strengthened Ava's resolve. She stared at a photo of one of Victor's previous victims, her fingers gripping its edges. He's done this before, and no one stopped him. That changes now. Memories flickered like faint echoes. Raised voices, papers scattered across a desk, a room cloaked in shadow. Ava pressed her hands to her temples, trying to grasp the elusive fragments. Think. What did you see? What did you hear? But the harder she tried, the more the details seemed to slip through her fingers, like grains of sand. Still, one truth emerged from the fog. The night you lost your voice wasn't random. It's tied to all of this. It's tied to him. With Lucas's help, Ava tracked down an old source, a woman who had once worked closely with Victor. They met in a quiet cafe, where the soft murmur of conversation only heightened the tension between them. The cafe's low buzz and clatter of mugs softened, fading beneath the chaos in Ava's mind. She gripped her notepad, knuckles white, as her gaze darted between the woman's trembling hands and the window she wouldn't stop watching. Across the table, the woman stirred her tea with deliberate slowness, her hands trembling faintly, despite the blank mask on her face. "You don't understand yet," she murmured, her voice tight and low. Her eyes flicked to the window, watching it intently, as if expecting someone to burst in. "But you will soon." Ava's stomach churned, tightening painfully. Her pulse hammered in her ears, drowning out the comforting hum of the cafe. Slowly, she picked up her notepad from the table and scribbled a question. She slid it toward the woman, her hand steady despite her pounding heart. "What do you mean?" she'd written. The woman leaned closer, her face now inches from Ava's, her gaze piercing and intense. Ava shifted in her seat, the unease tightening its grip. "I shouldn't be here," the woman whispered, her breath quick and unsteady. "They'll know I've talked." Her words landed heavily in Ava's chest, leaving her breathless. Her fingers twitched, reaching for a steadiness she couldn't find. Slowly, she picked up her notepad and wrote the question with deliberate strokes. She held it up, her eyes locking with the woman's. "Why me?" The woman hesitated, her hands fidgeting with the edges of her napkin, tearing it into frayed strips. She glanced at Ava, guilt and resignation flickering in her eyes, before quickly looking away. Her trembling hands gripped her cup, her voice shaky as she spoke. Ava studied her closely, her pen gliding across the page. "Look at her. She's scared, just like you were, just like so many others. But she's here. She's talking. That means something." Lucas asked the questions Ava couldn't, drawing out details she hadn't dared to hope for. By the end, the truth was undeniable. Victor's immaculate public image was a facade upheld by manipulation and fear. Ava stared at her notes, her breath hitching as her eyes landed on the name scrawled in the corner of an earlier entry. Victor Hayes. With measured movements, she wrote on her notepad and slid it toward Lucas. "We need to meet him." Lucas read the words, his jaw tightening before he nodded. "We'll choose a location where he won't feel entirely in control," he said, his voice low and deliberate. Turning to the woman, he added, "Thank you. You've done more than you know." The woman nodded faintly, her hands gripping her cup. Ava's heart pounded as she absorbed the gravity of what lay ahead. Meeting Victor meant stepping directly into the fire, but it was the only way forward, the only way to bring the truth to light. Her resolve sharpened as she scribbled on the notepad once more. "We need to confront him." Lucas glanced at her words and nodded resolutely. "If we're doing this, we have to be strategic. We need neutral ground, somewhere he'll come but won't own." The theater was his idea. "It's neutral ground," he said, Somewhere he'll come, but not somewhere he'll own. Ava wasn't convinced. What if he doesn't show? She'd written on the pad between them, her pen pressing into the paper with doubt. He will, Lucas had replied, leaning closer, his voice steady. He'll want to see the pieces for himself. He can't resist thinking he can still control the outcome, and so the message was sent. Its contents carefully constructed to lure Victor out. The stage was set, both figuratively and literally, for the confrontation that Ava knew could change everything. Now, as she stood in the hollow shell of the theater, its grand interior reduced to shadows and decay, the weight of that choice settled heavily on her. Dust motes danced in the dim light streaming through cracked windows, and the faint creak of old floorboards echoed in the cavernous emptiness. Her evidence was meticulously laid out before her on the stage, each piece feeling like a fragile lifeline, a thread connecting her to the truth. And then, the sound of polished shoes clicking against the floor broke the stillness. Each step deliberate, each echo sharper than the last. Victor Hayes emerged from the shadows at the back of the theater, his presence filling the room before he even reached the stage. He stopped a few feet away, the cool glint in his eyes pinning Ava in place. His suit, pristine and unyielding, seemed to mirror his demeanor. Impeccable, yet menacing. You should have stayed quiet, Victor said. His voice was soft, almost conversational, but the menace beneath it rippled like a storm just beneath the surface. Ava's breath caught, her fingers curling at her sides as she steadied herself. The weight of his presence was suffocating, but she forced herself to meet his gaze, refusing to look away. Inside, her thoughts sharpened, cutting through the fear. I don't need a voice to bring you down. My story is louder than you'll ever be. Victor's smile was faint, more an indication of control than amusement. This, he said, gesturing to the evidence before her with a flick of his hand, isn't going to change anything. You think you've won, but you don't understand how the game works. Lucas stepped forward, breaking the tension momentarily, as he began presenting the truth piece by piece. His voice was firm and steady, and for the first time, Ava saw Victor's polished exterior begin to fracture. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly as each revelation chipped away at his armor. You don't understand what you're doing, Victor said finally, his tone cutting and sharp now. You think justice is on your side. You're in over your head. But Ava didn't flinch. As the cracks in Victor's facade grew, a strange calm settled over her. Her silence, once a source of despair and weakness, now felt like an unassailable wall. This was the moment she had fought for. The truth was out, and it was louder than anything Victor could say or do. She stood taller, her composure unbroken. "This is it. This is why you fought so hard. This is what they can't take from you," she thought, the strength in her resolve radiating outward. Victor stepped back, the calculated anger in his eyes barely contained. For the first time, it was clear. He wasn't in control anymore, and Ava, with her silence and the undeniable power of truth, had turned the tide. She had proven that even without words, her voice could echo louder than his threats ever could. To the person who buys my house, months ago, I uprooted my entire life and moved across the country with very little plan. My wife left me out of the blue. With no tether, I cashed out my 401k and threw caution to the wind. I drove until I saw snow before deciding to try out the small town life. After nailing down a full-time job and growing tired of life in the town's only hotel, I reached out to a realtor and asked her to show me the house that's been on the market the longest. A fixer-upper was just what I needed. The realtor didn't have much information on the home outside of the basics, but I was sold as soon as I saw it. 3 stories, isolated deep in the woods. What more could a man looking to start over with a project ask for? After closing, I was given a fill folder containing all the important information. With all the standard documents was a handwritten letter from the previous homeowner. The contents of the letter have me questioning if I made the right choice, but I've never been one to turn down a challenge. I have typed the contents of the letter below. To the person who buys my house, congratulations on the purchase of your new home. Or perhaps, should I say, you're welcome for your new home. I can only imagine what type of person you may be. A first-time home buyer? A newlywed couple just starting out? A growing family looking for more space? A retiree longing to be away from the hustle and bustle of the city? Or even just an investor looking for rental properties? The possibilities are endless, but no less exciting. Just as exciting as when my late husband and I first purchased the property so many years ago. The tree covering so far off the main road made such a serene setting. We just couldn't picture ourselves living anywhere else. However, all things must come to an end. Such is life. I'm not as young as I once was. My children worried for me out here all alone. Or so they say. My oldest daughter decided the property was too much for me to care for on my own anymore, and encouraged me to move to the old folks' home in the next town. As loath as I was to leave the home we spent such wonderful years in, I could no longer argue with her. The upkeep was getting to be a little much for these old bones. I agreed on one condition: that the home not be put up for sale until my death. So, if you are receiving this letter, I have shuffled off this mortal coil. That also means that the house has most likely sat vacant for some time. In that case, There are a few matters of housekeeping you should be aware of. As you may have noticed when you viewed the property, the house is quite the old gal. Her 3 stories stand tall and formidable in the dense forest surrounding it. Though the trees tower over her, she will not be cowed. The roof has held up better than we ever expected with so many trees around. It was replaced in 2018, another urging of my oldest daughter, though it had only a few cosmetic issues at the time. The trees closest to the home are sturdy and hardly ever dare to drop their branches directly on the roof. By the time you move in, it may be time for a fresh coat of paint, though I found the house does prefer to be a light blue with white trim. She likes to stand out amongst the darkness of the forest. I'll never forget the way the old gal gleamed at Christmas time, with string lights shining bright enough to light up the snow all around. Oh, I do hope you have the most wondrous Christmases there. Anyway, I've gotten off track. Yes, the house will require a new coat of paint, and I'm sure you will decorate the inside as you see fit. Before you start to move too much around, be aware that some of the items in the house have been strategically placed. For you to fully understand what a treasure you have just purchased, I feel it is pertinent for me to tell you a little story. My Reginald and I purchased the home fully furnished before any of our children were brought into this world. The first year we lived there was pure bliss. Young and in love, we dedicated almost all of our time to each other. My husband fondly referred to this time as our honeymoon phase. One of our favorite activities was exploring the vast property surrounding us. When the weather did not permit roaming, we explored the home itself, though from the outside it appears as any manor in the woods would. Inside is much to be discovered. During that first year, we enjoyed the convenience of it being fully furnished and move-in ready. But over time, I yearned to decorate, to make the space my own. Reginald, ever the obedient husband, humored me. We started by taking down every painting that hung on the walls, deciding which to keep, which to sell away, and which to simply move to a different area. That is when the first odd discovery was made. Behind a great many of the paintings, there were holes, right in the plaster walls. Some appeared to be methodically cut in perfect squares. Others, as though a fist was punched straight through it. We, of course, decided that those would eventually be covered back up. I piled the painting up in the drawing room and set about cleaning the walls. By the end of the day, I had yet to decide on what exactly to do with them. So I let them lie and went to bed. In the morning, however, they were all hung perfectly back in their spots, as if all my work had never happened. For days, I assumed Reginald had done it, and he assumed I had. We ultimately didn't speak of it until it was too late, when my Reginald started back to work as supervisor of the factory in town. I resumed my endeavor to make the home feel like it was mine. I hated the big rugs scattered all around the place. I've always preferred a nice hardwood floor. No need for carpets that hold all the dirt and hair that's dragged in. The furniture was easy enough to move out of my way, and the rugs all rolled up nicely. I was mighty proud of my hard work until I got a good look at the wood. Large, dark, discolored splotches marred what should have been beautiful hardwood hiding under those ghastly rugs, which I'm sure you've seen. Unfortunately, much like the paintings, the rugs remained. I'd go into more detail, but some of the full truths have been lost to time. But I will tell you, be careful what you look behind or under. Though the house allowed me to dust and paint and add decor as my heart desired, it did not allow me to leave any of its secret spots uncovered. Behind dressers, cabinets, doors, paintings, mirrors, and under couches, chairs, and beds, the house hides. After the first year, I gave up trying to rearrange and became content with adding a few of my own touches here and there. I think that once the house realized I'd stopped trying to change it so much, it settled down. For a while at least, we entered a time of peace again. But the monotony of loneliness began to get to me. Thankfully, we soon welcomed our oldest daughter. As soon as she arrived, the house awoke with laughter and joy. All hours of the night, she would giggle, and the house seemed to echo with it, those echoes long lingering even after she fell asleep. As we welcomed more children, it seemed that no matter how much we tied, the house remained scattered with toys. It was as if I'd turn my back and they'd all jump right off the shelf and resume their places on the floor. The never-ending chore of putting away made me weary to my bones. In a stroke of wisdom, my Reginald decided one summer to send the children to my mother's for a week. She lived on the coast, never one for the colder air where we chose to live. We didn't see her often, and the children did love her so. Off they went without a complaint, leaving my love and I alone for the first time in over a decade. We didn't know what to do with ourselves. That first night, it was as if we were newlyweds again. But I won't traumatize you with any of that. We felt so young again, only waking when the sun finally shone through our bedroom window, with no rush to feed the masses. When we finally emerged from our bed a little after noon, we walked into an unexpected scene. Every toy, book, pen, shoe, and piece of sports equipment that belonged to the children had been strewn about the first floor in the most uncivilized manner. There was no question that the house had been perfectly clean the night before. Our first thought was that we'd been burgled, that someone had broken in, thinking we'd all left for the coast. The only problem is, we told no one the children were leaving, and we had no neighbors to have noticed their departure. Regardless, we checked for signs of forced entry on all the doors and windows. Finding nothing, we were forced to believe it was whatever force we had once felt in our home, agitated with us once more. As you've probably ascertained, the house is very particular. We had come to accept not being able to move the furniture or pictures, but were only just realizing that the house did not like many of the new things we'd brought in either. How many times had I picked certain toys up off the floor, only to find them there again in the morning? How many times had I unfairly blamed the children for messes they claimed they knew nothing about? That morning, we saw the truth of the matter, and I knew something had to change. The children didn't deserve my anger or anxiety. They were not to blame. When they returned, I was sure to tell them as much. But before then, we had to find a way to coexist again with the forces in the house. What should have been a week of relaxation and reconnecting became a week of trial and error. On the first day, we tidied the house, putting everything back where we thought everything should go. Each room made perfect. Then we waited for the first item to fall out of place. As if the house was testing us, it took hours for anything to happen that first day. Then it started, slowly at first, giving us time to notice the items that were out of place, time to correct. It seemed to go in order of the things that bothered it the most, or maybe just the longest. The first toy to go was a set of bells we'd gotten when our oldest was small. The set was a popular toy amongst all our babies. With our youngest being nearly 8 at the time, these bells hadn't truly rung joyously through the house in years, yet they always made their way off the shelf onto the rug. Our family's peace was more important than any sentimentality, or at least that's what my husband and I agreed. And into the bin they went. Quickly, we noticed patterns. Toys that made too much noise. Shoes that left scuffs on the floor. Sports equipment that may or may not have been involved in a few broken windows and busted light bulbs. Books that sat too heavy on the overburdened bookshelves. Room by room we went, removing any and all items the house found to be offensive. It was by no means an easy undertaking. So many items had many more years of use left in them. But knowing what I knew, I could no longer sacrifice my sanity for a few boxes full of possessions. When the last box of offending items left the property, it was as if the house itself took a deep, calming breath. I hadn't quite realized just how stressed I'd been feeling until I didn't feel it anymore. Weight I'd grown accustomed to bearing eased off my shoulders. The air was lighter, the lights were brighter, and the house even seemed to smell better. Not that there was a noticeable bad smell before. Everything just felt better. That night, Reginald and I slept deeply for the first time in years, waking refreshed and ready for anything. I was ready for my children to come home. This week had been the longest we'd been apart since the youngest was born. I'd spent 2 weeks in the hospital that time, but that's neither here nor there. We had 2 more days before my mother would return them to us, sun-kissed and spoiled rotten in the best way. In those 2 days, I made time to sit quietly and listen to the house the way I used to when it was just Reginald and myself. Familiar creaks and groans greeted my ears. My senses were filled with the house. The smell of wood, water, earth, detergents, fabric, food, all seemed to swirl around me. For a long while, it was all just the normal feelings of home, of any home. Every house I'd ever lived in had the same smells and sounds. I assume every house in the whole world has the same base set of smells, sounds, and lights. I knew there was something past that, though, here. So I waited. A few months back, I'd read a book on meditation, hoping to help lift some of the stress I'd been buried under. While I waited, I took a few quests from my readings. I methodically relaxed each muscle, starting at my toes and working my way to my head. I felt each breath as it traveled in and out of my lungs. I tried to tune my ears inward to listen to the beating of my heart, attempting to hear the blood rushing through my veins. That's when I finally heard the breathing. It wasn't my own. It was off-beat of mine. Reginald wasn't home. We had no pets, but the slow, deep, steady breaths were just a whisper in my ear. I focused with all my might on the sound, hoping to pinpoint the direction it was coming from. Realization dawned on me. I was all around me, as if I was inside a lung. Then, a heartbeat, slower than my own, reverberated around me. Slowly, I opened my eyes. What I saw changed everything. Ever so lightly, the walls billowed in and out. Ever so slightly, the chandelier above my head rhythmically bobbed, as if contracting, thrumming. Everything in the central family room moved in a steady beat. How many days had we spent in this room? The majority of our lives circulated in this room, where we were most often all together as a family, the way a family room should be used. We often joked that this room was the heart of the house, because there was always so much love here. We were not wrong. This room truly holds the heart of the home. You may think I'm crazy, but I am telling you, here and now, The house is alive. It is not haunted. There are no goblins or ghouls. The house itself is a living, breathing being. A being that I have cared for, just as it has cared for me, for more years than I care to count. You see, my daughter never believed. She did not understand. When I finally agreed that I was too old to care for the house on my own, it was because the house told me so. Not her. I was growing too old to care for it, and in turn, it could no longer care for me. It needs someone younger, someone to breathe new life into it again. And if you care for it, it will care for you. When tended to properly, it will multiply your life and give you more than you can ever imagine. I do hope Carmen found the right person to take on the challenge. I pray the house does not miss us too terribly much. If you follow the rules, then it should grow to love you, too, I'm sure. With love, Cynthia. Rule 1. Don't move the furniture. Rule 2. Don't leave any holes uncovered. Rule 3. Don't make changes. Only fix things that break. Rule 4. Don't put anything on the mantle in the bedroom. Rule 5. Never throw balls inside. Rule 6. Never scream at your partner inside. On the grounds is fine. Rule 7. Always walk gently. Rule 8. Always lock the doors. Rule 9. Always listen to the house. Take care of it, and it will take care of you. I have lived in the house for a week now. What I thought to be the ramblings of a crazy old woman who wanted nothing more than to stay with her home have quickly become undeniable truths. On my second night, the house welcomed me in a way only it could have. I'm not sure if this makes me just as crazy as her, but I vowed to care for this home as long as it cares for me. We're off to a great start. Broken statements. I've said too much. It's time for you to go. Detective Foster sneaked a weary glance at her partner, Detective Daniels, before casting a stern expression to the woman they questioned. You haven't said much at all, the detective countered. The living room grew warmer by the minute as the blazing sun rose higher into the sky. It had to be noon by now, and their small town was in the middle of a heat wave. Crime was in short supply, thankfully, and these days, most of the calls they received were from the elderly asking for help to set up their air conditioners. This woman did not have any cool air circulating her home. Her windows were open, letting the stiff, warm air sit like an unwelcome guest. The woman crossed her arms, twisting her head abruptly away from the officers. I can't say much more than I already told you. You're asking too many questions. Foster snapped her notepad shut, fighting the urge to roll her eyes. She turned her back on them to roam the living space. As she walked further away, she heard Daniels scoff. We're asking questions to help you, and I've already told you my answers to those questions. Barely, the woman gasped. "I don't like your attitude." Foster made her way into the kitchen as the bickering voices died down in the distance. Not that it was a large house, but she was more focused on looking around while the homeowner was distracted. Normally, she didn't condone her partner arguing with the victim, but sometimes it came in handy as a nice diversion. Earlier that day, the department had received a call from the neighbor claiming she heard breaking glass and then shouting. While on the phone, she noted the shouting had died down and all was quiet. Still, the woman's nerves were shaken and begged for someone to come over and check it out. First, the detectives visited the neighbor, but they didn't get any new information out of her. She was too afraid to even open the door for the officers. She had spoken to them through a crack in a window, motioning to the house next door. Foster made her way to the house first, while Daniels stayed behind to calm the poor lady down some. Foster had to knock on the door twice before the homeowner finally answered. Her name was Marianne Jules, and Foster guessed her to be in her mid to late 40s. She wore silk blouses, black dress pants, and was almost always in 3-inch heels when out around town. A string of pearls dressed her skinny neck that she always fiddled with. There was no wedding band on her finger, and as far as Foster was concerned, the woman didn't have any close family, nor did she know anyone in town before arriving. She lived alone and had recently moved here within the past 6 months. Marianne didn't make much of an effort to get to know the townspeople, and not everyone was eager to welcome her, Foster included. She remained polite, of course, but she was skeptical of visitors, especially visitors who stayed. Foster grew up in Willow's Landing, and over time, she realized one thing everyone here had in common. Every individual who made up the population here was born and raised in this small town. Sure, the occasional tourist came through, but no one ever moved to Willow's Landing, nor did anyone born here ever move out. When Marianne had finally answered the door, she was less than pleasant to see an officer standing on her front porch. She remained standoffish, but gave the detectives enough information for them to figure out the glass shattering the neighbor had heard was a window breaking. Marianne admitted someone broke into her house, which was enough for them to enter the premises, but they couldn't get any more information out of her. Marianne acted scared, but beat around the bush when asked why she didn't call the authorities herself. First, she thought it was her imagination. Then, she changed her tune and claimed she wanted to check it out herself. Apparently, she has a cat hiding around the house somewhere, and suggested that maybe the feline had knocked over a vase. According to Marianne, it took her a while to discover the window because a 2-story condo is a lot of square footage to cover. It was tough for both detectives to remain impartial as they questioned her, but that was all they needed, for her to admit a window broke. How did the window break? Daniels had asked. Which window was it? Mind if we check it out? Foster had questioned. That was when Marianne stopped playing with the pearls on her neck and pressed the back of her hand to her forehead as though she were ready to faint. Claiming she had said too much, Foster sauntered through the kitchen, taking in the surroundings. It was pristine, almost as if Marianne had never used it before. Yet, a knife was missing from the butcher block on the counter by the sink. The dishwasher was open a crack, so maybe Marianne did cook and was simply a neat freak. Regardless, the detective made a mental note of the missing knife. Too obvious? Maybe, but Foster didn't have a good feeling about this woman. The window above the sink was still in one piece, which was the main reason Foster looked around the place, determined to find this broken window. She rounded the island in the middle of the room and exited through the back. It led to a hallway. To her left was a bedroom, and in front of her was a bathroom. The detective peered into both rooms, but the windows were still intact. She made her way down the hall, the voices of her partner and Marianne growing louder. They still argued, as Daniels tried to get more information out of the supposed victim. But Marianne had none of it. She kept scoffing in response, without using her words. Marianne acted like a child, and, as Foster re-entered the living room, she could see the impatience and swelling frustration written all over her partner's face. She was on the other side of the living room now, behind Marianne, who didn't seem to notice the detective's return. Or maybe she didn't notice the absence beforehand. In no attempt to relieve her partner, Foster locked eyes with her him. She gave a curt nod while pointing up. Daniels didn't answer, but turned his attention back to Marianne instead. Foster walked up the stairs to see what she could find on the second floor. At the top of the landing, Foster faced the second bathroom. It was clean, the window unbroken. To the right was another room that looked to be an office or study area. Like the rest of the house, it looked untouched. The window was open, but not broken. A tuxedo cat sunbathed on the windowsill. So the cat was real, after all. Foster turned around, the stairs to her left now. She could hear her partner spouting off something to Marianne, but she couldn't make out the words. It was only a matter of time before Marianne kicked them out, so Foster had to act fast. There was one room left in the house, straight down the hall. If there was no broken window in there, she didn't know what they were doing here. Quickening her pace, the detective poked her head into the room at the end of the hall, which looked like the primary bedroom, judging by the queen-sized bed. Bingo! The window above the vanity was shattered to bits. Foster stepped into the room, noticing a messy trail of glass from the window to the other side of the room. Halfway through the trail, the glass on the floor mixed with red spots on the beige carpet. The detective stepped to the left, following the trail. before huffing out an exasperated sigh. On the other side of the bed, invisible from the doorway, lay the body of a man. Instinctively, Foster crouched beside the body, pressing her fingers against his neck. No pulse. She figured as much. She studied the body briefly. The deceased lay on his stomach, arms laying above his head, as though he had tried to break his fall. His legs stretched out behind him, as though he fell to his knees first. Foster grunted as she recognized the kitchen's missing knife from the butcher block sticking out of his back. From the cuts in his shirt, it looked like he had been stabbed at least twice, and clearly didn't see his attacker coming. A pool of blood, still damp, surrounded the body. He likely bled out rather than the stab killing him. Foster stood, staring down at the body. Marianne didn't live with anyone, and with the window shattered, this man must have been the culprit. It was easy to assume Marianne defended herself and stopped the intruder before stealing anything, though she couldn't yet speak those accusations aloud, as it was all speculation. Foster looked forward, noticing a pair of doors. Whatever he was after must have been inside the bedroom closet, unless he heard Marianne coming up the stairs and tried to hide. Without being able to make out the words, Foster heard Marianne's voice raise. It seemed time was up. Before heading back downstairs, the detective made a quick call for backup and forensics. The house was now a crime scene, and the detectives would gladly leave the home for now. But little did Marianne know she was going with them. Foster sauntered down the stairs as she wrote notes in her notepad. About halfway down, she heard Marianne's sharp tone. "What were you doing upstairs? Who gave you permission to go upstairs?" "You did," Foster replied. "We came over to check out a possible break-in, and you let us inside. I checked things out, and, yep, you've got a broken window." Marianne swallowed a lump in her throat. She stomped over to the front door, opening it wide. "Out. After you," Foster responded. She walked over to the door, motioning for Marianne to lead the way with a smile. "The house is a crime scene now, so we'll need to vacate the premises until forensics gets here." A squeak escaped Marianne's lips, but she didn't move. Foster held out a hand. "Shall we walk out together?" Marianne glared at the officer, clutching her pearls. "I can walk myself. Thank you very much." She snubbed the detective by throwing her nose in the air as she strutted onto the porch and down the front steps, as though it was her idea to exit. Daniels leaned closer to his partner as the two stepped outside, closing the front door. "I'm confused. The broken window was in the master bedroom, along with the body of a man with a knife sticking out of his back. When walking through the kitchen, I noticed the butcher block missed a knife," Foster explained in hushed tones. Daniels exhaled, putting his hands on his hips. "A homicide? We haven't seen one of those in, what, a decade? Something like that. And to think one of our residents was a trespasser." "Who died?" Foster watched Marianne, who paced her front yard, one hand fiddling with her pearls, and the other by her mouth as she bit her fingernails. "Subtle. That's the concerning bit," she answered. "More concerning than our newest resident possibly being a murderer? I didn't recognize the body." Daniels let his arms fall against his sides. "That's not possible. We keep track of who enters town, even tourists. No one's entered Willow's Landing since Marianne arrived 6 months ago." Foster shrugged her shoulders. "I said it was concerning." Daniels threw his head back, groaning. "So, we have a new resident who keeps to herself, and a stranger new to town who breaks into her house and she murders him in return. Technically, we can't say she was the one who murdered him. It's definitely likely, of course, but we need to do some investigating first. It's still enough to hold her for questioning." Daniels smirked. Foster chuckled. "This is true. She can't run away or avoid our questions anymore now, can she?" They heard sirens in the distance, getting louder as backup arrived. The detectives noticed Marianne freeze in her tracks, looking off into the distance. Before she could make a break for it, the partners sandwiched her. "Are you aware there's a dead body in your bedroom?" Foster questioned. Marianne gasped. "Excuse me?" "So, you didn't see anyone in your room?" Daniels added. Marianne twisted her head to face him. She glared at him. "Of course not. Are you aware the broken window was in the main bedroom?" Foster continued. Marianne turned her head back around to face her. "Well, yeah. I went to check it out, remember? I thought the cat broke something. You saw the window, but didn't see the body?" Daniels pressed. Marianne breathed heavily, looking back and forth between the two. Finally, she threw her hands up, narrowing her eyes at the ground. "I don't know what you think you're trying to do, but it won't work on me." A couple police cruisers pulled up to the house. Neighbors started peering out from behind their curtains, some sitting on their front porches. One man, not even trying to be subtle, started dusting his swing porch while making heavy eye contact with the police arriving. "Are you aware there's a knife missing from your kitchen?" Foster proceeded anyway. Marianne stomped her foot, covered ears, and squeezed her eyes shut. The detectives rolled their eyes at one another. Daniels took this as an opportunity to step away to get the rest of the team up to speed. "I refuse to be interrogated like this. You came by without my calling you for help. You searched my house without a warrant. Now you're treating me like some sort of criminal." Foster folded her arms, shrugging nonchalantly. "Fine. Forget the body. The fact remains that someone broke into your house, and now they're dead. Were you expecting anyone today?" Marianne relaxed her shoulders, staring quizzically at the detective. "No. Was someone staying with you at your house?" "No. Have you spoken to anyone recently about something special you keep in your house? Do you know why anyone would want to break in?" Marianne shrugged, shaking her head. She played with her necklace again, deep in thought. "No. I've never even seen him before." Foster sighed, pulling out her handcuffs. "What are you doing?" Marianne took a step back in horror. "Seen who?" Foster pressed, holding on to the cuffs. Marianne hesitated, but pointed to her house. With a condescending attitude, she said, "The supposed body you claim to be in my house?" Matching her tone, Foster replied, "We never said the body was a man." Marianne froze, pressing her lips together. "Put your hands behind your back," Foster said. Marianne did as she was told, too shocked to disobey. She listened as Foster read her rights, too stunned to speak. As soon as Foster completed the speech, Marianne opened her mouth to protest. But the detective stopped her as she led her to a squad car. "Don't speak," she ordered. "You've said too much already." 2 monsters, Anatolius's home had been destroyed. Apart from the crackling of fires, still eagerly munching at the dregs of what used to be beautiful greenery, the island was silent. Anatolius might not have noticed the army behind him, were he marching on an adjacent kingdom. This kingdom, his kingdom, had been razed. Every home they passed was either a pile of ashes or the blackened husk of a stone wall. Anatolius pressed on. Nepheli had to be okay. She'd been alone with Anacreon for 6 years. He still had to apologize for that. He remembered the linen sheets she'd wrapped around their boy as she carried him. The boy with her blue eyes and the golden hair Anatolius himself had been born with. Hair that would by now be darkening to a soft brown. He'd been looking forward to catch up with them, with the goings-on of the kingdom, with the childhood he'd missed out on. As they walked through the town, he heard several of his men cry out. The sounds of weapons dropping to the stone roads and the sound of feet racing off. Several corpses dotted the paths. Most were burned beyond recognition, but a few wore helms bearing a crest that had been melted by the heat. None of his men, of course. Some army that had sacked the place, but some didn't wear armor. Anatolius was trying not to think about that. He had to see to Nepheli first. He had to. His sandal hit an uneven patch of stone in the path, and he stopped. Behind him, the sounds of his army rustled to a stop. No, he stumbled forward, the dying light of the day casting long shadows that blended with the soot-blackened stone, as if to trick him into thinking that it was supposed to look like this. The courtyard was in disarray. The once beautiful gardens that Nepheli had so meticulously tended to were reduced to cinders. The 2 cypress trees at its entrance, little more than stumps. A bench lay in a heap of broken stone. The doors, at first glance, were open, though taking another trembling step forward, Anatolius realized there was no door in the hollow mouth leading into what was once his home. "Sir," Anatolius jumped. He'd thought most of the men had run off, seeing to their own homes, but Theodoros stood behind him, standing to attention. His eyes were hard, as if he were pretending to be blind to the destruction. Theodoros had fled his home, a country to the south, one with gods like Niam and Anansi, rather than Zeus and Hermes. He remembered helping the man out of a shipwreck when they were boys, making a comment about being surprised he'd survived the wrath of Charybdis, and realizing the boy couldn't understand his words. He didn't even have the language to tell Anatolius his name. Theodorus was the name they'd given him in Liu, and the name that had stuck. Apart from Anatolius, he didn't really have a family here. Theo, he said, stepping forward. He'd intended to make it a long, confident stride, but his foot skidded in the ash and rubble. You don't have to see this. I must, he said. His eyes grew soft as he regarded his king. If only to keep you on your feet. Anatolius frowned at him, then took a deep breath and nodded. He ducked into the doorway. The humble palace was illuminated by a wide hole in the wall, breaching through the ceiling of the upper floor. The smell of charred flesh, stale after days of abandonment, still hung faintly in the air. Anatolius pulled up his cloak to cover his nose. There could be survivors, he said doubtfully. Check the cellars. Someone could have hidden there from the fire. I'll go check my bedchambers. Theodoros opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again, giving his king a nod. He ducked into the kitchen and disappeared from view. Anatolius put one foot on the bottom step, taking a deep breath to steel himself, regretting it immediately as the odors seemed to coagulate in his nostrils. He readjusted his cloak about his nose and headed up the stairs, dreading what he'd find at the top. They could still live, he tried to reassure himself. If they're not up here, Theo might find them in the cellar. Perhaps Anacreon was hiding between the wine barrels when they came. He paused on the steps. They? Who was they? The city had been burnt to the ground intentionally. There were dead soldiers among the townspeople. But who on earth would have this big a problem with him? He almost turned around to go find one of those dead soldiers and examine the corpse more thoroughly. But he shook his head and took another step up. Don't distract yourself. As his words echoed in the still air, he froze. The sound of something rustling in the rooms overhead were distinct now. A scuttling of feet and fabric. Someone was here. One hand on the hilt of his xiphus, he charged up the stairs. It could be Nepheli, but it could be someone else entirely. He threw his shoulder through the remains of the door, barging into his rooms amid a shower of soot. He then froze. His chambers, now a single room with the walls burned or knocked over, were destroyed. He shook his head, refusing to let himself be distracted by the destruction, and turned to the bed. Their bed. His blood ran cold. Nepheli, thin and gaunt, staring at him in disbelief and fear, lay in the bed. At first, He thought she must be tied there, with how little she moved. But as she lifted her trembling hand, he realized she was simply too weak. With effort, she outstretched a finger to point at him. No, not at him. Behind him, he spun in one fluid motion, drawing his sword. Initially, he saw nothing but the darkened corner of the room, blackened by shadows and soot. Then a low, dark chuckle echoed, and two glowing pinpricks of red appeared from the void. And here I was, half expecting her to die before you arrived, said a smooth voice, a shape separating itself from the shadows and resolving into a strange figure. It stepped forward, some kind of humanoid relative of Chimera, Anatolius thought. Its legs were smooth, dark red, scaled things, talons clinking on the stone floor between the tattered remnants of a pelt. The long, thin end of a reptilian tail whipped around. The figure's face remained in shadow, apart from its eyes, but Anatolius could just make out the shape of their head, adorned with wicked horns that swept back and arched up into points like some cruel wave. "Who are you?" he demanded in horror. "Not what?" The being chuckled, bringing a hand up to rest on their hip. It had those same dark red scales, same hooked black talons, clashing with the clean white of the creature's exomus. Most people ask me, what? I've had many of these conversations, King. Yet you're the first to ask after my identity first. I'll commend you on that. I know what you are. You're a monster. You brought your army here to destroy my people, and I will know why. Speak. The figure, infuriatingly, remained still. Another chuckle rumbling in their chest. Anatolius could practically hear Nephili's bones vibrating as she trembled in fear or exhaustion, perhaps both. What had this thing done to her? It's quite close to dark, they said, drawing his attention back. Are you certain you want to strike now? What's that supposed to mean? He shot back. One more dark chuckle. One more tremulous heartbeat. The sun was barely a blood-stained sliver cresting the windowsill. Then it was gone, the light dying from the room. The figure swept toward him. Only his reflexes saved him, his foot swinging out as he pivoted, trying to catch the creature unawares. The first thing Anatolius had learned in war was that a soldier's sword wasn't his only weapon. An instant later, he was staring at the ceiling through star-clouded eyes, wheezing for breath. The creature's tail tip unwound from his ankle, and the thing stepped over to look down at him, a silver grin cracking the violet dusk light. You should have gotten her and gotten out, they said, and lunged down at him. Cat. Pain greeted him as he woke. Head muddled, He groaned, reaching up to rub at a crick in his neck. A hand grabbed his wrist, and he cursed under his breath. That thing, let go! The words, though attempted to be forceful, came out as a pained hiss. He glared up at the figure above him, reaching for his sword. A moment later, he realized it wasn't the thing from earlier, but a more familiar face. Theodoros. Anatolius relaxed. What happened? Theodoros loosened his grip on his wrist, readjusting to help Anatolius sit up. There was a pain in his eyes, Anatolius realized. Or was it guilt? He shook his head to clear it, feeling a lot like he was nursing a hangover without having drunk the wine. I am sorry, Your Majesty. Anatolius looked around the room. It was still in the same disheveled state as before, only now a huddled mass lay on the ground beside him. The creature, he realized. Its tail was still coiled lightly around his leg, but it lay in a puddle of blood. And Anatolius realized with shock that the sword whose handle he'd been reaching for was buried in its chest. Looking over the thing now, it seemed so much smaller, so much less imposing. He could see its face clearly now. Nearly human, but for a dusting of crimson scales across its cheeks. Had they been that bright before? Or had he been imagining it in the distorting shadows of the encroaching night that collected in patches around the outside corners of its hollow silver eyes, framing its face? It was a woman, too. More sets of horns studding her jawline, almost like facial hair. Her mouth hung open, revealing a set of fangs whose tips were dipped in blood. Anatolius reached up again, and this time Theodoros didn't stop him as he reached for that crick in his neck. No, not a crick, he realized, hissing in pain as his fingertips brushed a set of puncture wounds. This thing, what is it? He asked as he dropped his hand, looking up at his friend. Theodoros shook his head. He didn't know. Anatolius stood, feeling dizzy and weak as he got to his feet. He looked over to the bed, toward the unmoving lump under the sheets. Theodoros got up, but if his intent was to help, he moved too late, as Anatolius stumbled to the side of the bed and fell to his knees beside it. His wife, her once beautiful face now sunken in and bloodless, stared with dead eyes back at him. He reached up with trembling hands, one hand cupping her cheek, the other reaching for her hand. It was still outstretched, with the pointer finger out. She must have used the last of her strength to try and warn me, he thought, leaning up to kiss her forehead as tears collected in his eyes. Without looking up, he said, "Where is my son?" Theodoros was silent for a long moment. "I found him in the cellars," he finally said. "Dead? The smoke must have killed him." Theodoros usually sounded stern. Even in battle, he'd never cracked. But he loved Anatolius's family just as much as he himself did. And now their loss had broken something in him. If the pain in his voice was anything to go by, Anatolius took a deep breath, then stood, still holding his wife's hand. The night before he'd left for war, he'd promised to return. He'd promised to her worried tears that she'd see him again. That promise had been fulfilled, but it felt hollow now. A sudden rage seized him. He dropped her hand. Then, despite his weakness, he stormed to the side of the creature who had attacked him. The thing that had ransacked his kingdom, destroyed his home, murdered his people and his family. He reached out and ripped the sword from her chest, scoring it down her belly to upend her innards onto his floor. "How dare you!" he snarled. Blood arced as he swung the blade down, then sprayed out as he drove the blade into the dead monster again. "How dare you! How dare you! You God's damned rat! You disgusting wretch! I was loyal to the gods. I commanded an army. I destroyed my enemy. How dare you spit in my face like this?" With each heartbeat, he swung the sword again and again and again. Blood drenched the floor, splattered the walls, and soaked up the ash from the fire, coating his clothing in sprays of red and black. A bit of it got in his eyes, his mouth, as he screamed his defiance. He didn't care, even as he tasted it going down. He didn't stop until the body was unrecognizable. Chunks of meat decorated with once fine fabric and putrid viscera. Even then, he didn't want to stop. But his fatigued muscles gave out, his arms refusing to lift the blade. He glared at the thing, the only bit of it still vaguely intact, its mouth, still agape. Then that mouth closed and smiled at him. "So you accept," came a voice, though the lips didn't move further. He blinked, about to turn to Theodoros to ask if he'd heard it too, then froze. Anatolius was no longer in his room. He looked around, finding a field devoid of color. He spun sluggishly, wondering if he'd threat of exhaustion, if he was about to be approached by Karen and guided by Fairy to join his family. For a moment, he hoped so. Then a sound echoed. A footstep. A figure did approach him, but not the figure of the god he expected. A familiar figure, with lizard's legs and a thin, whip-like tail. He hissed and crouched down, sword ready, and lunged forward with a strength he thought had abandoned him. "Wrong way, King," said the woman's voice. Snidely, he whirled on her, slashing once more with his blade. Again, her voice was behind him, though this time it was an exasperated sigh. "Maybe I won't tell you what you've done to yourself. It's more fun to imagine your despair from Tartarus. Anyway." He turned, though this time confusion stayed his hand. "What I've done to myself?" The creature gave him a flat look. clearly disappointed. Yes, you could have let me kill you. I came to your kingdom, destroyed it, slowly drained your wife, and let your son choke on his own death in the cellar. And you didn't bother to ask me why. I'm insulted, Your Majesty. He curled his lip. Why would I want to know why? You deserve death. Oh, I'm already dead. Good job on that, too. Though if you'd been a little quicker, you might have escaped. What? He paused. She'd opened her mouth, tongue tracing his blood off her fangs. He reached up, finding the wound she'd given him. Though in this strange place, touching the area didn't hurt. I've made you immortal, she said smugly, hands on her hips. That wasn't my goal, though. I am very old, Anatolius. I was hoping to die. I was just glad for a little fuss on my way out. Why seek me out for that? He demanded, hand still on the wound, as if by covering it, he could avoid the immortality she promised. Something told him it wasn't the immortality he might have wanted. I've heard of the wars you Greeks wage, she said conversationally. Lifting one hand from her hip, she cupped the air, and Anatolius jumped back as a lithe flame danced in her palm. I carry a power to make them more destructive, as made evident by what I did to your home. The power of one creature's rage. I did not bring those soldiers, Anatolius. That was one of your allies, sending their army to defend your people. They failed. You... His mouth went dry. You did all this on your own? She grinned, crooking her fingers around the flame in her hand. Upon closer inspection, that flame was bigger than it appeared. Bright orange, bleeding into a pinkish hue, and then darkening to black as they curled around her cruel grin. That was my power, Anatolius, and now it's yours. She swept forward soundlessly. Then, suddenly, her hand was on his chest, the tips of her claws digging into his flesh and caging the flame against his skin. He screamed, but before he could swing his sword again, she'd pressed it into his chest. Everything became blinding pain. The fire seemed to consume his heart, then flood through him, along the paths of his veins, setting him alight. That strange flame morphed him into a human-shaped bonfire. Everything was flame. All he knew, everything he'd ever known, was that flame. It burned away every bit of him, leaving a smoldering hunk of coal in his place. Within himself, he saw two faces. His wife, smiling at him, her dazzling beam burning away the memory of her dead in her bed. That of a young boy, older than he'd known his son, but undoubtedly him all the same, grinning playfully up at him through the mess of curls on his head. Though made of that flame, he reached out, pulling the both of them into an embrace. When he woke again, once more looking up at his own ash and blood-flecked ceiling. Once more with Theodorus's face looking with concern down at him. There were tears in his eyes. Anatolius's home had been destroyed. Car radio. The silence is deafening. Finley stares at the empty slot where the radio should be. The hole in the center console mocks him. The engine roars and jumps to life. Finley laughs at the power and presses the gas pedal. The engine responds and races down the street. He sighs and shrugs off the silence. At least it's a nice car, he thinks to himself. Finley grips the steering wheel tighter and continues to drive. He's never driven a convertible before. The large amount of snacks sits in the passenger seat. 3 bags of chips, several candy bars, a meat stick, a couple of grape sodas, Red Bull, and an orange Gatorade are piled into a small mountain next to Finley. There is also $437 in his pocket. Finley glances at the convenience store in the rear view mirror as he drives away. The gun wasn't loaded, but the clerk behind the desk didn't need to know that. She graciously gives up her drawer in exchange for her life. Finley smiles as the memory of the robbery passes through his head again. "Everything in the drawer, now!" he shouts. The clerk cries, but nods in understanding and opens the register. Ding. This is much easier with a gun, thinks Finley. He grins under his mask. He holds the basket of snacks in his free hand and points the gun at the clerk. Ida is the name on her shirt. She's short with straight black hair and small eyes. Tears run down her cheeks as she collects the bills. With a shaky hand, she gives the money to Finley. "Thank you," Finley decides to say. He runs out the store and watches as a Chevrolet Corvette pulls up to the store. An older gentleman shuts off the engine and opens the door to get out. He sees the gun before he sees Finley. "Give me the keys," Finley says loudly to the man. The elderly man jumps in surprise and quickly hands the keys to Finley. Finley dumps the basket of snacks into the passenger seat, puts the car in reverse, and drives down the road. When he is clear of the scene, he pulls off his mask and tosses it on the floor. He goes to adjust the radio, but the dial isn't there. The whole compartment is empty. Finley is an average man with an average build. His curly locks meet his eyebrows and licks his earlobes. His eyes are wide and too big for his narrow face, close together with long lashes. Stubble on his chin creeps its way up to his sideburns. The long bridge of his nose flares into broad nostrils, and his big pink lips pushes out from his face. He has a birthmark in the shape of a small diamond under his left eye. His cheeks are freckled and covered with a thin layer of dirt. Finley prefers Xbox over PlayStation and drinks apple juice more than a grown man should. He hates roller coasters because he has to sit next to strangers. He loves school, but dropped out his senior year. Finley is passionate, creative, and extremely intelligent. Finley wasn't always a thief, but the worst in his life brings out the best in him. Did I forget to feed Edison? Finley thinks to himself. Edison is his pet goldfish, who spends his days in a sphere on Finley's nightstand. Finley's hamster died in a freak vacuum accident when he was in kindergarten, and since then, he was against pets. Edison was a prize Finley had reluctantly won at a carnival. So far, he's lasted over a year and tripled in size. Finley tugs nervously at his Iron Maiden shirt as he passes a cop. He checks his speed and cautiously pulls the seatbelt over his chest and clicks it into place. He thinks, "Don't pull me over, please." He isn't ready to deal with the police. He hasn't thought this far ahead. The officer turns left and into a gas station. Finley sighs, relief, and looks back at where the radio should be. It's too quiet for him. His thoughts float carelessly through his head. He pictures himself as a police officer for a moment and laughs at the thought. If his dad was around, or if his mother stopped drinking, if his brother never beat him, and if he stayed in school. He wondered where his life would have been then. What kind of person he would be now. An outstanding citizen, he imagines, with a wife and kids. He creates the vision of his family in his head. A woman with large breasts and red hair. 2 kids, 1 boy and 1 girl, with toothless smiles on their dirty faces. They would be soccer players, like Finley was, and always outside. He shakes off the thought. Sucks not having a radio, he thinks. He sits up taller in the driver's seat and lets out a little scream. Ah! He relaxes and slumps back into his seat. He tries to whistle and fails, only allowing air to escape his pursed lips. He blows a tune through his teeth and grunts in frustration. I wish I knew how to whistle. Both my parents could. Even Franklin can, he says in his head. He tries again, and a small tweet of a sound flies from in between his lips. He grins at his small accomplishment. I hate tuna fish, he thinks. Finley starts to space out behind the wheel. The lack of sound tricks his brain. He visualizes a concert he went to last year. He remembers all the pockets he picked and wallets he stole. He made 5 times the amount of the cost of the tickets he paid for, but wasn't able to enjoy the concert properly. The songs of the band echoes throughout his mind. He taps the steering wheel to the beat of the song stuck in his head. He hums the melody. He looked back at the center console and sighed loudly. There wasn't even a clock. What time is it? he wondered. I should have stolen a watch. Or a car with a radio. The car was quiet. Even the purr of the engine was hushed. Everything is still, except the thoughts in Finley's head. He thinks about the graduation he never attended, the smell of his last girlfriend right before she walked out the door, the taste of sea salt ice cream, and how it was superior to any other flavor. He pictures the last family photo they had together when times were good. How Franklin had his arm around him in a rare, loving embrace. It is loud in Finley's head, and there is no sound to hide behind. He groans and tries to shake off all his thoughts, clear his head. It's no use. The thoughts always come back, stronger and louder than before. He is going mad from the silence. I can pull the steering wheel. It would be easy to wreck such a nice car. The guardrail teases Finley. He envisions the crash in his head and plays out the scene slowly. The metal twisted around the body of the convertible, the popped wheel and broken windshield. He shakes off the thought and continues driving, now upset by the concept he created in his mind. He can't distract himself from himself. There was nothing to drown out his perception of his own ideations. He can't clear his head. He's trapped within himself. Finley screams and pulls the car over. The wheels spin angrily against the dirt on the shoulder. He bangs the steering wheel with a fist and groans. He hears the sound of sirens and looks in the mirror. He didn't notice the police officer that pulled a U-turn at the last intersection. He didn't see the car behind him getting closer and closer. He watches as a police officer steps out of his squad car and aims a gun at his Corvette. Now what? This isn't part of his plan. He licks his lips and glares at his new challenge. He throws the car into drive and slams on the gas pedal. The car lurches forward and spins wildly back on the road. The cop calls it in and drives after Finley. The two-lane road was barren. The twists and turns makes Finley feel he was back on a roller coaster without the strangers. The contents of his stomach sloshes around. Well, this is great. He wanders ahead, trying to come up with a plan. He didn't know these streets that well, and another police car pulls up alongside Finley. He kicks up the speed and lets out a yelp as the car responds. They race down the street. The sirens blare loudly. Finley watches as the police cars serve and drive around each other like synchronized swimmers after him. These guys are good, but not as good as me. I need to lose them. He thinks about car chase videos he's watched online and in movies. The bad guy always gets caught somehow with some small mistake he plans to avoid. He turns down a dirt road quickly, but but the cars behind don't falter and follow him. The dirt is slick on the wheels, and with the sharp turn, he flips the car. He curses himself as the car rolls into the ditch upside down. The sound of scrapping metal pierces his ears. It's quiet for a moment as the dust settles. He wasn't going to get caught. Especially now, they will find out exactly how many people he's robbed. He isn't planning on going to jail. Edison would miss him. "Step out of the vehicle with your hands in the air," the officer shouts, spit flying out of his mouth. They were behind open car doors, ready for Finley to react. Finley's heart races as his hands went for the unloaded gun. "You'll never take me alive, coppers," he shouts in his mind. He smiles. He was on the track and field team in high school. Surely he could outrun the police. He's done it before, with success. He pushes the car door open, and without thinking, Finley hops out the car and runs, pointing the gun behind him. His feet slip on the loose gravel, but he collects himself and moves his feet fast underneath him. He takes 3 more steps away from the police, gun heavy in his hands. Bang! The silence is deafening. The angst of Antilla. "Tell me the truth. Where are you from?" Yannick roared, leader of the Goobies, a notorious nomadic southern desert clan. In his teepee kneeled a young woman bound by the ankles and wrists. She wore a dirty, white satin tunic and breeches. Her brunette hair escaped from under her sand-dusted headscarf. Around her tired eyes, a darkened mixture of sand and sweat stuck to her skin. Other than that, the rest of her face remained untouched. Inside the teepee stood a few wooden chests and a bed of dried rushes wrapped in linen. A lantern sat next to the bed, and about 4 woven rugs covered the desert floor. A leather bag lay across the floor, next to the woman. Through the crack of the entrance, stars could be seen, twinkling in the inky darkness of the desert sky, stretching out towards the far horizon. A slight chill wisped its way inside and curled around the room. Besides the faint talk of those in the surrounding tents, only the crackle of the rushes burning in the lantern could be heard. "I've said too much," the woman murmured. Yannick slapped her across the face. Her head snapped sideways, the red sting blooming across her cheek. Slowly, she turned back to face Yannick, trembling with rage. She glared at him, her blazing eyes drilling unsettlingly into his soul. Yannick took a step back. The wrinkles on his forehead loosened as frustration turned to shock. "No way. This can't be," he whispered, feeling his stomach drop. He lowered to one knee to face her. He had to confirm what he was seeing. He let out a sharp sigh of disbelief. His eyes weren't fooling him. "How?" he asked her. She continued to shoot daggers at him, remaining quiet. "How?" he repeated. "How what?" she spat. "Amber." Your eyes turned amber. She broke eye contact with Yanuk and stared blankly at the reed-woven floor. Her eyes flickered back to a deep shade of brown. Yanuk shuddered as he felt a sudden chill leave his bones. "Tell me I'm wrong when I say that you're from Antila," Yanuk said, holding his breath. The woman shut her eyes and sighed. "Tell me!" he roared impatiently. She looked up at him again, amber flickering faintly through her pupils. A coldness instantly rushed over him again. "You're not wrong. I am from Antilla," Yanuk exhaled sharply, falling backwards to sit on the floor. He crossed his legs and ran one hand through his hair. "H, how is it possible? How did you survive?" he questioned in a softer tone. "Untie me, then I'll tell you," she hissed, her menacing amber gaze burning into Yanuk. "You have some nerve. Then let my secrets remain untold," she jeered, narrowing her eyes. Her lip curled slightly. Yanuk scoffed before getting up. He walked over to her leather bag and threw it angrily behind him, out of the woman's reach. He reached down, lifted the end of his robe, and took a sharp dagger from a tight piece of cloth wrapped around his ankle. He kneeled behind the woman and started to cut away at her restraints. She rolled her shoulders and stretched her neck the moment she was free. She stood up briefly, stretching her legs, and before sitting back down with her legs crossed. Yanuk kept his eyes locked on her, dagger in hand, before he sat down again. "Thank you," she said, with a slight nod. "I will tell you how I managed to make it out alive from Antilla. But it will not help you, nor will it bring any peace to this situation. It will only quench your curiosity." "A favor for a favor," Yanuk said, twisting his knife from the blade's tip. "Very well." The woman dug deep into her mind to try to resurface the day she made it out of Antilla. The memories came flooding back in an instant. "Tonight, a distant star will die. It will explode into blues and pinks and purples," Kira said, bursting with excitement. "And how do you know this?" I said, crossing my arms. Kira had a vivid imagination. We never knew if what she was saying was fact or something she had created in her head. "Next to the North Star last night, I noticed one of the stars getting dimmer and dimmer until it disappeared. It was always there. I had it plotted on my star map. I waited for a long time, but it never came back. This lines up with the legend of Nara," Thomas interrupted. "The legend that described Nara Envith witnessing the night sky, illuminating in an unfathomable display. The disappearance of a star followed by a cascade of colors, painting the night sky." Thomas leaned against one of the cobblestone walls of a side street in the market square of Antilla. The three teens were hidden in a corner of the square, watching the passers-by. The city was bustling with Antillian traders and foreign folk. Horses with small wooden carts clicked along the uneven cobblestone roads surrounding the square. The stalls were propped up in the center. Interested customers weaving their way in and out of them. Bursts of vibrant colors decorated the city, from vivid Antillean woven silk to collections of earthy sienna spices from the south. A preacher suddenly emerged from the crowds and took a stand at the city's gathering point next to where we were chatting. He instantly drew the attention of the market-goers. His brown hair was scraggly, and his cheeks wore a crimson flush. His sweaty, cream tunic adhered to his skin and was half stuffed into the top of his black breeches. His chest heaved dramatically as he gasped for air. "We need to make peace with the brethren of Tuiga," he shouted, trying to regain his breath. "They will come, and they will not stop unless we equalize the trade in the north. The rulers of Antilla are setting us up to die. Open your eyes, people. The brethren are coming." The city guards swiftly appeared and hauled the man off the gathering point. A few of his passionate followers preached behind him, throwing their fists in the air in frustration as he was dragged away into the teeming crowds. Quickly, a bard stood up, seizing the unoccupied podium, curating songs of mockery about the preacher. He quickly gained a laughing audience. "Well, do you want to join me on my search tonight?" Kira toothily smiled, oblivious to the scenes around her. Thomas and I exchanged looks. We knew that meant camping on the roof of her steading till early hours of the morning in the freezing cold. "It's a bit chilly, don't you think, Priscilla?" Thomas asked, raising his eyebrows. I agree. Besides, my parents would not appreciate it if I were to fall ill." I get it, Kira grumbled. "But just know that you are missing the chance to watch a legend be reborn. The legend of Kira." Thomas and I rolled our eyes. We spent some time browsing the market stalls for any interesting items we could buy with our measly 5 silver coins. To our avail, we found nothing. Once the vendors began disassembling their stalls, we headed home for dinner. The foreign merchants made their way to their respective inns, weary from the long day. The concealed stars slowly emerged into the darkened sky, and a cold air settled over the city. Merchants drank into the early hours, while children drifted to sleep. Wrapped in woolen blankets, I woke up to the frantic banging of Kira's mother on our front door in the dark of night. "Hurry, hurry, wake up!" she screamed. My dad rushed to the door. My mother's footsteps could be heard running to the kitchen. In the background, I could hear the petrified voice of Kira's mother explaining to my father, "The brethren are coming." Kira saw them crescenting the hills from the south. "We don't have much time. We need to leave before they get here. There are thousands of them." Without a moment's hesitation, my dad came storming into my room. "Dayu, what's happening?" I asked. He grabbed my arm and dragged me off my bed without a word. My mother was waiting at the door with a lantern. In the span of a few minutes, buildings had been set alight, and screams could be heard echoing through the city from the outer walls. We ran through the streets, trying to avoid soldiers and other screaming townsfolk, hoping to make it to the north of the city before the soldiers got there. But it was no use. We were surrounded. "Priscilla, you need to listen to me," my dad said sternly. He kneeled down to face me and placed his hands firmly on my shoulders. "Those carts by the city walls will soon be leaving. You need to climb under one and grab on. Do not let go. Do you hear me? Do not let go. You need to get out of here. We love you so much. We will come find you. Go. Be safe, my dear." Tears spilled down his cheeks, illuminating in the fire's blaze. "Dad, go!" I did what I was told. I ran to a horse and carriage next to one of the burning buildings by the city's outer wall. Before I went under, I looked back, hoping to see my parents, to say my final goodbyes. But they had vanished. I climbed under the large carriage and held on to the wooden foundations. I wrapped the top of my feet behind another plank of wood. It only took a minute or so before a couple came running in a panic and climbed into the carriage. "Hurry!" the woman screamed as her partner leaped inside, closing the door behind him. A coachman jumped onto the front of the cart and instantly got the horse in a gallop. The cart moved quickly out of the city, cobblestone streets changing to rough dirt roads. We turned occasionally until we were headed for the south. As we moved further away, the stillness of the cold, airy night echoed the distant, muffled screams escaping from Antilla. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but a cry could not form. I didn't know if I would ever see my family or friends again. My whole world had changed in a heartbeat. My thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the jolt of the cart coming to a stop. I heard the neigh of a distant horse and footsteps approaching the carriage. There was a sudden gurgling as the swish of an arrow flew through the air. There was a splintering of wood, and a sudden force pushed the carriage backwards. The coachman's horse neighed, its nostrils flaring as it pulled against its reins, hooves scraping against the ground. The footsteps neared the cart until I could see the feet of what I could only guess was a soldier. The soldier walked to the carriage door and swung it open. Those inside screamed in fear before the man silenced their petrified cries with a pierce of a sword. The blood in their throats gurgled and spluttered for a few seconds, their bodies jerking and flailing in the carriage before they fell still. My lungs screamed for air. My heart was racing in my chest. The soldier dragged the bodies out of the cart and threw them on the ground with a thump. Their heads bounced off the soil. Two sets of lifeless eyes stared blankly at me from the dirt floor. The woman's gown and the man's tunic were drenched in blood, and they had huge gaping wounds for necks. I felt my palms get sweaty and my grip loosening. "Don't let go, Priscilla. Don't let go," I told myself. I felt a sudden heat and heard a crackle of wood. The carriage had been set alight. I turned my head frantically, trying to find the feet of the murderer. Instead, 4 hooves galloped alongside the carriage and headed in the direction of Antilla. I wanted to wait until I couldn't hear the thunder of hooves anymore before letting go. Instead, the fumes of burning wood engulfed my lungs, and the hiss of flames dancing in the wind deafened the soldier's departure. The fire closed under the carriage. The sweat on my hands was as slippery as oil. My body burned, sweat grabbing onto my hair and the fabric of my clothes. The roaring flames licked off my exposed skin as they surrounded me. It was then I let go. I scurried out from under the carriage, staying low. I looked cautiously around, but saw nothing. I carefully moved away from the cart, pulling myself along the ground with my forearms and pushing myself with my feet. My heart pounded in my chest. I had to keep going. I had to be brave. A forest lay ahead. Through the mud and reeds, I finally made it to where the grass met the tree line. I got up on one knee, attempting to stay low, wiping the sweat from my forehead on my ashy linen shirt. I tried to regain my breath. I looked back at Antilla, the burning carriage collapsing in the corner of my eye. The city was being swallowed by the fire. I could make out hundreds upon thousands of more soldiers marching their way to the stone walls of my city. Their huge war band stretched into the distance, further than the eye could see. A harrowing pain of grief shot through me, each quivering breath a battle against the burning agony in my chest. Before I could process anything, the sound of soldiers on horses re-emerged from my left. Without thinking, I ran. I ran into the forest, never looking back. I had lost everything that day. There has ever been a more notorious massacre than the massacre of Antilla. There were no survivors, except for me. Yanuk shook his head in disbelief. "Are you ready?" he asked. "For what?" Yanuk stood up and outstretched his hand to regain the north. Priscilla blinked at him in bewilderment. They did not only steal Antilla. The Brethren banished us nomads from our territories, leaving us stateless in the south. They are trying to rule over all the sacred lands. We shall not let that happen. We are going to fight. We will take back what is rightfully ours. Are you in?" Priscilla hesitated for a moment. The bottled anger boiled her blood. A fiery passion burst in the pit of her stomach, longing to gain revenge for her friends, her family, her home. She looked up at Yanuk, Eyes burning with an igniting amber, Priscilla nodded and took Yannick's hand. She was ready to fight, so today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.